from a woman thrashing against plastic on a kill table to a bloodied man gasping under fluorescent warehouse lights to barrels bobbing in swamp water while Jordan Chase basks in stage lights and self-help slogans. Season 5 doesn't open with control. It opens with collapse. Dexter's syringe misses the clean narrative Harry's code promised him the moment Lumen wakes up on Boyd Fowler's table. Fully conscious, staring at the knives, the plastic, the man who is supposed to be a ghost. The careful ritual is broken. The plan is gone. And that's the point where her story really starts. Not when she's kidnapped. Not when she escapes Boyd. When she sees Dexter in the one place no one is ever supposed to see him. So here's the central question that drives this season's trajectory. How does a woman who has been kidnapped, tortured, and nearly murdered decide that the safest place she can be is next to the man who almost killed her by mistake? What kind of psychology does it take for the kill room to become a refuge? And why does every failure in Dexter's system make that choice feel, to her, less like madness and more like survival? Let's kick things off by naming the paradox. Lumen doesn't learn to trust Dexter when he's in control. She learns to trust him precisely when his control fails, when his mask slips, when the investigation closes in and he's forced to improvise instead of manipulate. Stalk the target. Prepare the room. Leave no evidence. That's the fantasy. But in this video, we're going to track what actually happens when each of those steps breaks, and a survivor watches the Bay Harbor Butcher myth fall apart in real time. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on what Dexter and Lumen do to Boyd, to Chase, to the men in the barrels. The focus is on every moment the plan goes wrong. The scream on the table that should expose Dexter. The botched hotel confrontation, the camp raid, Deborah standing on the other side of that plastic in the finale. Each major section will walk through a new collapse in Dexter's system and ask one question. How does Lumen respond when she sees the man behind the ritual instead of the ritual itself? Along the way, we're going to draw a hard line about our angle. This isn't a romance analysis. It's not a simple trauma bond story. It's a forensic breakdown of how shared violence, exposure, and mutual risk turn two broken people into partners, and why that trust is powerful but unsustainable once the kill list is finished and her dark passenger goes quiet. By the end, we'll answer not just how Lumen learned she could trust Dexter on that plastic sheet, but why she ultimately has to walk away from the only person who ever truly saw what was done to her and what she did back. To understand how Lumen ever reaches that plastic sheet moment with Dexter, we have to rewind to the baseline. Before the kill rooms she chooses, there was the kill room she never escaped. A barrel girl, abducted off the road, vanished into a system of men who treated her pain like a recreational activity. Concrete image first, a locked room, harsh lighting, plastic not as protection but as containment. Multiple men cycling through, cameras rolling, Jordan Chase's voice on the tapes turning her suffering into a self-help performance. No plan, no exit, no timeline. Just ritualized torture repeated until time stops feeling real. This is the environment that strips agency in 3 moves. They control when she eats, when she sleeps, and when she screams. Everything is predictable in the worst possible way. The only variable is how bad it will be tonight. From that point on, the psychology of trust doesn't just erode, it rewires. Hypervigilance stops being a symptom and becomes a survival strategy. Every sound is a potential threat. Every door is an ambush. Her startle responses are not overreactions. They're data from an investigation her nervous system is running 24/7. Memory fragments, because holding the whole experience at once would be unbearable, so her mind cuts it into pieces just to stay functional. And here's the key. Any kindness becomes part of the torture pattern. A glass of water, a gentle tone, a promise that it's over now. She's learned that these are not signs of safety, they're the prelude to the next escalation. So when we meet Lumen in Season 5, the world has already collapsed into a binary, captors and potential captors. There is no neutral stranger, no safe bystander, no default assumption of goodwill. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on what was done to her, but how many people participated and coordinated it. It's not one monster in the dark. It's a network. Men taking turns, backing each other up, sharing a language, a ritual, a code of their own. That's a specific kind of betrayal. It teaches her that male power is collective, that secrets are shared, and that if one man is being kind, it's probably because the others are watching. So when Dexter appears in her life with knives, plastic, and a hidden room, trauma logic activates. After what she's endured, it actually makes more sense to assume he's another predator than some dark savior. The central question for her is not, can I open up emotionally? It's, if I misjudge this man, do I die? Trust isn't risky. It's potentially lethal. That's why, in this video, we're going to treat every tiny concession she makes toward Dexter as a major plot event. Her default isn't zero trust, it's negative trust, backed by evidence, built on torture, deception, and repeated violation. Each major section will track how Dexter's failures collide with that baseline, and along the way, we'll see how often her body prepares for the blow that, against all prior experience, never comes. So, when we finally watch Dexter and Lumen collide, it doesn't happen in a coffee shop or a crime scene. It happens on a kill table, under plastic, in the one environment where Dexter believes his control is absolute. Let's kick things off with the investigation that puts them in the same room. Dexter tracks Boyd Fowler through dead animals, toxic barrels, and that eerie solar panel truck, expecting a standard Season 5 hunt, stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room. But when he follows Boyd to that remote property and opens the shipping container, the pattern fractures. Instead of a single guilty man, he finds a mass grave in progress. Multiple women, torture devices, industrial plastic everywhere. And in the middle of it, Lumen, not a body to catalog. A victim, barely alive. That detail matters. Dexter's entire code is built around killing the guilty, not rescuing the almost dead. By cutting Boyd down and dragging Lumen out, he's already off script, but his reflex is to drag reality back into his system. In this video, we're going to see that reflex fail in real time. To keep this clear, Dexter's first plan is brutally simple. Step 1. Eliminate Boyd in a controlled kill room. Step 2. Clean up the shipping container. Step 3. Deal with the witness who saw him, heard him, and can destroy his cover. In his mind, Lumen is a liability, not a person. The table is where liabilities go. So he straps her down, wraps the plastic, lays out the knives, pins the photos. This is routine. This is the ritual that's kept him safe for years. Then she wakes up. Concrete image. Lumen's eyes snap open to fluorescent light bouncing off plastic sheeting. Her breath hits the barrier over her face. She turns her head and sees the knives. The blood slides. The taped up images of women who look like her. New captor. Same position. Her body doesn't care that Dexter has a code. Her nervous system only knows captivity. She screams. She names what's happening. She begs, bargains, fights the restraints. Instead of a silent, sedated target, Dexter gets a conscious survivor, reenacting her original trauma on his sacred table. And the plan collapses. The central question for Dexter in that moment isn't, can I get away with this? It's, what exactly am I doing? He hears her talk about Boyd, about the other men, about being taken, transported, broken down. His investigation suddenly has a face. He hesitates, scalpel poised, the code whispering that witnesses mean consequences. And he doesn't do it. He cuts the plastic. He lets her live. The focus is not just on the mercy, it's on the asymmetry of power she experiences. This man had every tool, every excuse, every inch of control. He could have finished what Boyd started, under a more polished aesthetic. Instead, he stops. That doesn't make him safe in her mind. It makes him dangerous and inexplicable. Along the way, that paradox becomes the seed of trust. The very setting that proves he is a monster also proves he's something else. If he was just like the others, why is she still alive when she walks off that table, shaking, convinced she should run? We're left with a micro cliffhanger in her psychology. She escapes the room, but not the question of who or what just chose not to kill her, and what that failure of his plan might mean for both of their trajectories. Lumen walks out of that room, but Dexter's problem walks out with her. His failure to finish the plan doesn't stay on the table. It follows him home, into his routines, into the one part of his life that has always felt untouchable, the cleanup. Let's kick things off by remembering what cleanup actually means for Dexter. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room, leave no evidence. It's not just plastic and bleach, it's a psychological firewall. He kills, he dismembers, he dumps the bags in the ocean, and he erases witnesses the same way he erases blood spatter, thoroughly, ritualistically, without exceptions. Code promises him this: clean endings equal continued control. Lumen is the first time the ending refuses to stay clean. She has seen everything the investigation board in Miami Metro never will. His face above her, his knives laid out, the plastic, the slides. She knows the process, not just the result. She is not a body to dispose of. She is a living variable, traumatized, mobile, and capable of speech. In Dexter's world, that combination is more dangerous than any serial killer. So he does what he always does when a plan cracks. He designs a new one. In this video, we're going to track how that new plan is doomed from the start. Dexter decides to keep tabs on her, to watch from a distance, to treat her like a delayed task in his schedule. Let her calm down, let the chaos of Boyd's disappearance settle, and if she becomes a threat, he will correct his earlier mercy and kill her later, in a safer, more controlled environment. To keep this clear, Dexter expects a pattern he has seen before. Fear pushes witnesses underground. They run, they drink, they forget. But Lumen doesn't behave like a passive witness. She runs and hides, yes, but then she circles back. She revisits the crime scenes in her mind and in reality. She starts asking questions about Boyd, about the barrels, about the other men. Instead of dissipating, her terror condenses into focus. This is Dexter's miscalculation in pure form. He assumes fear will make her vanish. Instead, fear plus rage makes her visible, active, and wildly unpredictable. She buys supplies. She stalks leads. She almost exposes both of them by chasing her abusers on her own. Every move she makes is a direct attack on his illusion of control. And then comes the pivotal choice. Dexter steps in. Not to silence her, but to manage the damage. He hides evidence, steers her away from police, and, almost against his own stated psychology, starts prioritizing her safety over the simplicity of killing her. What begins as risk containment quietly becomes protection. Is he shielding his secret or preventing her from being re-victimized by the same men he's hunting? The focus is not just on the operational failure here, but on the relational consequence. Because he cannot clean up Lumen, he is forced into ongoing proximity. He watches her patterns, hears her story, sees the cost of what was done to her. You cannot learn to trust someone who disappears after almost killing you. You can only test trust when they keep showing up. Along the way, this failed cleanup sets the trajectory for what's coming next. The witness he couldn't erase will soon become the partner he never planned for, but only because his simplest solution, erase the witness, never works on Lumen at all. So when Dexter fails to erase Lumen, we don't cut to an instant alliance. We cut to aftermath. A woman stumbling barefoot through Miami night, clothes still damp from plastic, eyes blown wide. Every car headlight is a spotlight. Every engine backfire is a gunshot. Her nervous system has one message: the world is now a maze of traps, and every corridor ends in a table. Let's kick things off by staying with her, not with Dexter's plan. We watch Lumen bolt from that site and land in a nowhere space, anonymous streets, a cheap motel, the kind of place that promises privacy and delivers surveillance. She flinches at every sound in the hallway. She double-checks the locks, then triple-checks them, because the central question in her body is simple: who's coming to finish the job? To keep this clear, her first test of Dexter isn't verbal. It's spatial. Does he chase? Does he hunt her the way Boyd and the others did, closing distance the second she runs? Or does he do something unfamiliar in her trauma psychology, allow space without vanishing? Dexter shadows her from a distance, tracking her movements, staying close enough to intervene, but not close enough to grab. From our perspective, that's still control. From hers, it's the first deviation from the pattern of absolute captivity. The motel sequence turns that deviation into data. Lumen is on the bed with the TV on, but not watching, replaying Boyd on the table, Boyd in the barrels, Boyd in the room where she was broken. Her phone becomes a lifeline and a weapon. She calls, she demands explanations, she tries to force the chaos into a coherent story. Who was he? Why did this happen? How many more are there? Dexter, on the other end, does something almost no one in her recent life has done. He doesn't flood her with reassurances. He doesn't minimize. His communication is careful, minimal, factual. When she confronts him about Boyd, he doesn't gaslight her. Doesn't suggest she misunderstood. Doesn't imply she was chosen for some twisted honor. He says, in essence, yes, Boyd was a monster. Yes, what was done to you was real. That non-lie is small on the plot level and massive on the psychological level. Her captors lied about everything: why she was there, what they would do, when it would end. The lies were part of the torture. Dexter's refusal to rewrite her reality is the first crack in that system. He's dangerous, but he isn't distorting. Along the way, Lumen's internal categories start to split. There are men who hurt her and lied. And then there's this man who terrifies her but validates the horror. She does not trust his motives, but she starts to trust his information. The microtrust moment is subtle. She takes what he tells her about Boyd and the others and uses it to orient her next move. She acts on his description of the conspiracy. At this stage, that trust is purely instrumental. Dexter is not a safe person. He's a potentially useful monster. Yet that distinction matters, because once you admit one monster can be more truthful than the rest, you've already begun a new trajectory. The next step is asking what else he might be right about. And this is where everything Dexter has been trying to contain slips out of his hands. Up to now, he's been reacting to Lumen. In this stretch of the season, she starts reacting to him, to his information, to the shape of the conspiracy he's sketched. The roles invert. The prey starts moving like a hunter, and Dexter's plan to manage her psychology quietly collapses. Let's kick things off by naming that plan. After the first wave of panic, Dexter revises his approach. Keep Lumen at arm's length, track her movements, and wait for the trauma to burn itself out. No more tables. No more late-night confessions. Just surveillance, gentle discouragement, and the hope that if he controls the perimeter, the problem will resolve itself. It's damage control masquerading as compassion. But Lumen doesn't burn out. She ignites. Instead of retreating, she uses the names and details Dexter let slip about Boyd and the others. She starts following leads, watching the men who watched her suffer. We see her outside a warehouse, in a parking lot, in those liminal spaces where she used to be the one dragged inside. Now, she's the one waiting. The focus is not just on her rage, but on the precision of that rage. She's not lashing out at the world. She's tracking a specific network the legal system can't or won't touch. And then she jumps too soon. No plan, no weapons, no backup. She confronts one of the men in the open, running on pure adrenaline and memory. It's messy, panicked, almost suicidal. In that moment, we're watching the exact failure Dexter thought he could avoid by keeping his distance, the witness charging into the line of fire before he's built any kind of safety net. To keep this clear, Dexter has two options. Let the scene play out and allow his problem to be removed, or intervene and expose himself. He chooses exposure. He physically grabs her, pulls her out of the confrontation, and in doing so reveals that he's been following her, that he knows exactly who this man is, and that he's willing to stand between her and a predator instead of behind her, nudging her toward danger. Her old captors engineered risk to keep control. Dexter is very visibly neutralizing it. Psychologically, that's a rupture. Lumen is furious. She wanted blood. He just took away her chance. But the central question lands hard. If he's just another monster, why is she alive right now? Because of him. Her brain has to hold both truths at once. He is terrifying. He is protective. That cognitive dissonance is the seed of a different kind of trust. In the urgency, Dexter slips. His competence is undeniable, his knowledge of the network too fluent, his investment far beyond self-preservation. Each major section of this failed containment strategy gives Lumen more data, more angles to test him from. And that unanswered question, why does he keep pulling her back from the edge instead of pushing her over it, is exactly what keeps her tethered to him as the investigation, and their partnership deepens. The unanswered question hangs there, and then Dexter answers it in the most dangerous way possible. He doesn't push Lumen away. He opens a door no one else has ever been allowed to walk through. Literally, into a warehouse full of barrels. Let's kick things off with that image. Cranes lifting slick, mud-streaked drums from a swamp, lids pried open, and the bodies of women unfolding out of plastic like discarded inventory. This isn't just another crime scene in Miami Metro's investigation. It's the entire system that created Lumen, rendered in one horrifying tableau. The scale collapses any illusion that her torture was an isolated event. This was a production line. To keep this clear, the central question in this moment is not who did this. We already know the list of men is growing. The question is, who is Lumen going to believe when they tell her what happened to her? Her own fractured mind, or the physical evidence Dexter is about to show her? As the barrels are opened, her fragmented memories start to click into place. The repetition of phrases, the number of voices, the ritualistic order of the abuse. Each body is a confirmation that she wasn't hallucinating, exaggerating, or misremembering under trauma. Her psychology gets an external reference point. The plan these men had for her, use, record, discard, is suddenly visible in steel and flesh. For a survivor who has been doubting her own perceptions, that validation is brutal, but it's also clarifying. And Dexter makes a choice. He could have kept her in the dark, drip-feeding names and targets, preserving his control. Instead, he takes her to the heart of the atrocity. He lets her see the barrels, the crime scene, the enormity of what she survived, and what he's been tracking. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this pattern. Whenever Dexter has a chance to minimize risk, he often chooses intimacy instead. It feels like connection. Operationally, it's a failure. Because information is power. By giving Lumen the full picture, his knowledge of the network, his access to evidence, his presence at a site that will define the season's investigation, he's arming her with enough to destroy him. One statement to the police about the man who knew too much, and Dexter's Bay Harbor Butcher past is suddenly back in play. This is not a small leak in the code. This is a controlled detonation. Lumen's reaction is horror, yes, but not paralysis. There's a grim clarity in her face as she realizes she wasn't singled out for some personal cruelty. She was processed. She was one victim in a workflow. Everyone else, from the cops to Jordan Chase's PR machine, either wants her quiet or gone. Dexter is the only one walking her through the architecture of the system instead of telling her to move on. That shifts their roles. She stops being just a loose end Dexter has to manage and becomes a witness he has to account to. She sees the same evidence he does. She can question his plan, challenge his timing, demand explanations for his choices. Along the way, his investigation becomes their investigation. And underneath all of that, the mutual risk hardens. From this point on, if either of them talks, both burn. That shared vulnerability is a primitive form of trust, even if neither of them would call it that yet. It's the backbone of the partnership that's coming. And the reason that no version of normal life will ever be able to hold what they build and what they break. Together, that backbone gets tested the second Dexter's code collides with Lumen's need. On paper, his system is simple. Identify a killer, confirm the guilt, prepare the room, eliminate the threat and every trace of it. No witnesses, no partners, no improvisation. Harry's lessons are a closed loop of control, designed to keep the investigation pointed anywhere but at Dexter. Lumen walks straight through that firewall. She doesn't want a philosophy or a protocol. She wants to stand in front of the men who turned her into an object and take their power back with her own hands. For her, justice that happens off-screen, in a plastic-wrapped room she never enters, is just another way of being silenced. If someone else kills them, do they really pay? If she doesn't participate, does anything inside her actually change? To keep this clear, we can look at the turning point conversation where those two logics finally crash into each other. After she learns what Dexter really does, Lumen insists she has to be there. That this isn't his story to finish. Dexter pushes back, almost reflexively quoting the code without saying its name. He works alone. He manages every variable. He believes he's protecting her from legal consequences, from trauma, and from the part of himself Harry spent a lifetime trying to contain. But, as in this video, we're going to keep seeing. His plan fails the second it meets another person's will. He tries to sideline her, sending her home, hiding information, staging operations she's not supposed to touch. She refuses to stay passive. She tails suspects, makes calls, confronts people, and in doing so, she escalates the risk on every front. Each solo move she makes threatens exposure, violence, or both. Ironically, the more he tries to keep her out, the more dangerous she becomes. So Dexter performs a brutal trust calculus. Letting someone into his kill process is the ultimate exposure. If she panics on a table, talks to the police, or simply misreads what he is, the entire Bay Harbor Butcher myth snaps back into focus, and his life collapses. The central question becomes, is she a liability to be managed, or a partner he has to bet everything on? The focus is not just on Dexter taking a risk, though. Lumen is handing him something just as volatile: her rage, her capacity for violence, the possibility that killing might shatter her instead of heal her. She is trusting that he will know when to stop, when to guide, when to pull her back from the edge, even as he pushes her toward each target. Along the way, the shared violence becomes their proof. They are both wagering that when the knife is raised, the other won't flinch from who they really are. Is that trust or mutual self-destruction? And can it be both? Because every step deeper into this collaboration seals something. With each body, each plastic sheet, each close call with Deb, it becomes harder for either of them to imagine a version of themselves that doesn't know what they're capable of together. And once you've crossed that line, how do you ever walk it back? And Dexter knows it. Once you've crossed that line together, you either pretend it was an accident, or you double down and make it a plan. But let's kick things off with Dexter's new solution. If Lumen is going to kill, she's going to do it his way. Methodical, contained, almost liturgical. In his mind, turning murder into a controlled process is the only way to protect her from the chaos that defines his own trajectory. If Harry's code saved him, maybe a diluted version can save her. We watch him translate a private ritual into a curriculum. He walks her through the knives and the duct tape, the plastic sheeting, and the timing of the syringe. Where to stand so you don't get sprayed. Why you confirm the target before you ever step into the room. To keep this clear, Dexter isn't just handing over tools, he's handing over an operating system. Stalk, verify, prepare, leave nothing to chance. But the focus is not just on technique. The camera keeps cutting back to Lumen's hands. They shake when she touches the blades. Her voice catches when she repeats his instructions. She flinches at the sound of plastic unrolling, because for her that sound isn't abstract procedure, it's the soundtrack of her torture. She is terrified, and she does it anyway. This isn't fantasy revenge. This is a woman walking back into the dark on purpose. And that's where Dexter's plan begins to crack. In theory, he's the calm instructor, the detached expert. In practice, Lumen's emotions keep detonating inside his neat design. A smell, a phrase, the way a test dummy slumps against the wrap, and suddenly she's not in a warehouse with Dexter. She's back on that table with Boyd. She freezes. She lashes out too early. She can't say the words he wants her to say. Dexter has to improvise. He puts a hand on her shoulder. He lowers his voice. He tells her they can stop, that hesitation isn't failure, that certainty matters more than performance. That's a shocking pivot for a man who usually treats feelings as variables to be managed. Here, he becomes a dark coach and an emotional anchor, grounding her when the psychology of the moment threatens to collapse the whole exercise. The intimacy of this is unsettling. He's not just watching her learn a skill, he's watching her confront two competing fears, becoming like the men who hurt her, and discovering she can't do anything to stop them. When she breaks down, he doesn't mock, rush, or exploit. He adjusts. He waits. He keeps her humanity at the center of a process built to erase it. And that's why she starts to trust him. Every time she falters, and he doesn't punish her, the central question shifts from, can I trust a killer? To can I trust the only person who doesn't treat my damage as an inconvenience? But along the way, both of them know this rehearsal only matters if it holds when there's a real body on the table. The next step is the real test, and once Lumen crosses that threshold, there is no training montage that can take it back. So when they finally graduate from rehearsal to reality, it looks, at first glance, like just another Dexter kill room. Plastic sheeting pulled tight, drain access mapped out, tools laid out in that familiar, surgical geometry of control. The chosen man from Lumen's list is already restrained on the table, gagged, taped, waiting. Dexter has built this space to mimic his ritual exactly, but with one crucial alteration: Lumen is the one holding the knife. To keep this clear, everything about the plan is designed to protect her from failure. Dexter has prepped the evidence, scoped the location, even positioned himself at her shoulder, ready to step in if she freezes. On paper, it's elegant. He transfers the act, keeps the logistics. In his head, the code expands just enough to let someone else borrow it, without threatening the larger system. But Lumen doesn't step into a system. She steps into an internal storm. The moment she faces her restrained abuser, the room fractures for her. Plastic rustling becomes the crinkle of that shipping container. The smell of tape and cleaner turns into sweat, metal, ocean, rot. His face isn't just a face. It's a collage of every man who touched her. Every night, she thought it would never end. Her grip on the knife shakes. Her breathing spikes. She is standing in two timelines at once, and both are screaming. This is where we watch Dexter's theory collide with trauma. He thought repetition and rehearsal would carry her through. Instead, we get the moment of near collapse. Lumen's arm hovers, blade inches above skin, her voice cracking as she tries to say why he deserves this and can't get the words out. The target whimpers through the gag. For a second, we can feel Dexter's whole plan teeter. Is he about to take over? Is he about to reassert control and turn her back into a spectator? He doesn't. And that's the pivot. Instead of stepping in, he improvises. Quiet, steady, he talks her through it. He doesn't minimize her rage or sanitize the act. He reframes it. This is not you becoming a monster. This is you ending what they started. This is you deciding what happens to your body for the first time since they took that away. In this video, we're going to keep returning to these moments where Dexter accidentally does real emotional labor. Because here he does the thing he almost never does. He makes the kill about someone else's psychology, not his own hunger. When the knife finally goes in, the fantasy shatters. There is no clean, cinematic execution. There is thrashing, choking, desperate muscle, and hot blood hitting her hands. Lumen's face cycles through horror, disbelief, grim resolve. Dexter could have made this efficient. Instead, he lets her stay in the mess. The focus is not just on ending a life, but on letting her feel, in her body, that she is no longer the one pinned down. Afterward, the room is quiet, but she isn't. She's shaking, crying, almost hyperventilating, then suddenly breathing in a new rhythm. Something unclenches. Some part of her that was still locked in that container has moved, even as a new darkness roots itself in the space that opens. Dexter stands there, completely unmasked, surrounded by plastic, a corpse at his feet, no lies, no excuses, and he is looking only at her. Is she okay? Can she stand? Does she regret it? That is the trust shift. She has now seen him at his most honest, and found that his priority, in that moment, is not the body on the table or the investigation that might follow, but her. He sees that she can handle the truth of him. She sees that he can handle the truth of her rage, her horror, her need to see this through. Along the way, their trajectories lock together, and once they wrap the body, once the plastic comes down, we're past a point of no return. This isn't a rehearsal. This isn't a one-time exception. It's the first shared kill on a list that can only end in exposure, separation, or something much worse. The illusion that this partnership can stay clean has just died on that table, even if neither of them is ready to bury it yet. Once that first shared kill is done, the problem isn't just blood on plastic, it's gravity. Violence has weight, and now it has to land somewhere in Dexter's so-called normal life. The plan was always simple: kill, clean, compartmentalize, but with Lumen in the picture, those compartments start leaking into each other. To keep this clear, Dexter's double life suddenly has a third layer. By day, he's the awkward but reliable blood spatter analyst, the single dad trying to hold it together after Rita. By night, he's the Bay Harbor butcher in everything but name. And now, tucked between those roles, there's Lumen, a traumatized survivor who doesn't fit any of his existing cover stories. She can't be explained as a colleague, she doesn't read as a casual fling, and she definitely doesn't match the image of grieving widower. So we watch him reach for flimsy scripts. Lumen is a friend in trouble. She's someone he's helping. When Astor and Cody show up, when the neighbor sees a shadow in the house, when a colleague catches a glimpse of a blonde woman near Dexter's place, he leans on half-truths and abrupt deflections. These aren't the clean, premeditated lies of earlier seasons. They're rushed patches on a hull that's already taking on water. And the facade slips. Lumen is seen in the backyard when she was supposed to be hidden. She answers a phone she shouldn't touch. Quinn's investigation into Dexter overlaps with sightings of this unknown woman. Dexter stammers through explanations that don't quite track, his usual calm replaced by a nervous urgency we rarely see. Each awkward encounter is a reminder. His control is eroding in public, not just on the kill table. That's where we see a different kind of improvisation. He physically moves Lumen out of sight, hustling her into bedrooms, into cars, into shadows. He redirects suspicion toward work, toward Harrison, toward anything that will pull eyes away from her. He takes social risks he normally avoids, snapping at coworkers, blowing off obligations, letting his good employee mask crack, because keeping her invisible suddenly matters more than maintaining his reputation. For Lumen, the psychology of this is crucial. Her abusers hid her to protect themselves. They erased her existence so their lives would stay clean. Dexter hides her to protect both of them, and when there's a choice between his safety and hers, he repeatedly chooses the more dangerous option for himself. That difference lands. It's not abstract ethics, it's observable behavior. In this video, we're going to keep asking the central question. What does she do with that evidence? Functionally, she starts to trust his lies outward and his honesty inward. She learns that when Dexter lies to the world, it usually keeps her alive. And when he tells her the truth about danger and logistics, she should listen. But every saved moment has consequences. Each major section of his life adds more witnesses, more half-remembered faces, more inconsistencies in his story. Every successful cover story around Lumen tightens the noose. More people have seen her, more lies need maintenance, and the trajectory of this partnership bends toward a point where one missed detail could make the entire construct collapse. Along the way, the question stops being whether Dexter can protect Lumen, and becomes when the outside world will finally notice the cracks he can't plaster over. If the lies around Lumen are expanding outward, the work they do together is collapsing inward, getting sharper, narrower, more focused. To keep this clear, we need to look at how Lumen's chaos is slowly converted into a plan. How a nightmare becomes a spreadsheet of names and faces that both of them are willing to kill for. It starts with almost nothing. Flashes of a camp, a barrel, the sound of other men breathing in the dark. Multiple attackers, but no stable sequence. Lumen doesn't have a single coherent story. She has fragments. In this video, we're going to treat those fragments the way Dexter does, as data points in an ongoing investigation, raw material that needs context, verification, and, ultimately, a target on the table. Their working sessions look mundane on the surface and horrific underneath. Lumen sits at Dexter's table, tracing circles on a legal pad, forcing herself to remember a watch band, a cologne, the way one man said tick, tick, tick before the others started. Dexter writes it all down. He cross-references license records, security footage, Jordan Chase's client lists, two people side by side, turning torture into columns, name, location, routine, opportunity, stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room, leave no evidence. But every new name is a fresh cut. When she recognizes Boyd's truck in a photo, we see the physical recoil. When she identifies Cole Harmon from a security still, it's like being dragged back onto the plastic. These aren't abstract monsters. These are men who went back to their jobs, their families, their gym memberships, while she was frozen in a warehouse. The focus is not just on vengeance, it's on the obscene asymmetry of consequence. Dexter moves through this with a split role that exposes his own psychology. On one level, he's pure analyst. He presses for specifics, asks her to repeat phrases, challenges vague impressions until they become actionable leads. On another level, he's caretaker, watching her pupils, her breathing, knowing exactly when the interrogation needs to stop, because the subject isn't a suspect. She's the only witness to her own collapse. How often has Dexter read victims only as evidence? Here, he has to read Lumen as a person, or the plan fails. And that's where trust starts to harden into something dangerous. Lumen is handing him the worst images in her head and trusting that he won't exploit them, won't dismiss them as unreliable, won't decide she's too broken to be useful. More than that, she's trusting that everything she says will be acted on, that each remembered detail will end in plastic and blood, not a police report and a shrug. Dexter meets that trust with a rare transparency. He doesn't sugarcoat the logistics. He walks her through the surveillance, the abductions, the kill rooms, the exit strategies, treating her as a full partner rather than a fragile liability. It's a strange form of safety. The world is still lethal, but now it's lethal in ways she can map, track, and attack with someone who believes her sitting right there. The central question becomes less, can she heal? And more, what does healing even look like after this? Because along the way, every successful hit reinforces the same framework. Fear leads to memory leads to a name leads to a kill. The more control she feels in that system, the more any future peaceful life will feel weightless, unreal. Like a story someone else told her about a person she no longer is. And that's exactly when the universe does what it always does in Dexter's life. It kicks the legs out from under the plan. To keep this clear, let's kick things off with the Jordan Chase camp raid, because on paper, it's classic Dexter. Remote site, limited staff, a neat timeline for entry, extraction, and disposal. Lumen is supposed to stay hidden, while Dexter handles the kill, preserving his control and her safety in one clean operation. But the second Jordan recognizes Lumen's voice and turns the situation into a live hostage scenario, we watch the whole structure buckle. The alarms aren't metaphorical here. There are literal shouts, running feet, the threat of security converging. Lumen is dragged, choked, pinned. The environment Dexter thought he'd mapped turns into an echo of her original captivity. And in that moment, the code doesn't matter, the ritual doesn't matter, the investigation risk doesn't matter. The central question becomes brutally simple. Who does Dexter save first? He doesn't hesitate. He abandons the perfect kill room fantasy and charges straight into the chaos, exposing himself, taking hits, improvising with whatever's in reach. Short term, it looks like failure. The target isn't neatly bound, the evidence footprint explodes, the timeline shatters. But from Lumen's perspective, something else is happening. Every time she's thrown to the ground, every time Jordan reasserts control, she looks for one thing: Dexter's silhouette coming back for her. He does. Again and again. No speeches, no reassurance, just concrete actions, cutting restraints, blocking blows, physically putting his body between hers and the man who once orchestrated her torture. The focus is not just on whether Jordan dies, it's on whether Lumen's nervous system learns a new rule. When the room goes loud, this man runs toward her, not away. Compare that to her captor's psychology. They engineered chaos as spectacle. Screams, confusion, the collapse of any sense of time or self, those were the point. When things escalated, they enjoyed it. They filmed it. Dexter, by contrast, treats chaos as a fire to be contained. He's not above violence. He is violence. But he's violence with a direction, away from her body, away from her terror. That behavioral contrast speaks louder than any promise could. And this isn't a one-off. The botched hotel confrontation with Jordan, the near discovery in the warehouse, when Deborah stands just meters away, behind plastic, each time, Dexter's meticulous control fractures. Witnesses appear. Evidence piles up. The investigation risk spikes. Yet the pattern holds. Lumen's safety first, the plan second, his own survival third. In this video, we're going to keep returning to that hierarchy because it's where trust actually lives. Anyone can seem reliable in a calm room. Dexter proves himself in the scream, in the siren, in the split-second choice to stay. Along the way, every loud failure paradoxically tightens their bond. If he were going to abandon her, he's had perfect chances. Instead, each escape leaves new forensic residue in Miami and new emotional residue in both of them. More clues for others, more weight on their consciences, and that accumulating pressure is what the next phase of their trajectory will have to answer for. That pressure finally does what pressure always does in Dexter's world: it cracks the mask. Lumen doesn't just partner with a meticulous avenger, she eventually stands in the same room as the monster he spent seasons hiding. And the central question becomes, when she really sees him, why doesn't everything collapse? Let's kick things off with the reveal beats that feel small in the moment, but add up like evidence in an investigation. Lumen notices the tools first, not just a knife, but a curated arsenal. Plastic, restraints, the exact same layout she woke up to on Boyd Fowler's table, reproduced with practiced ease. This is not a man improvising for her case. This is a man with a ritual. Then there's his language. The way Dexter talks about killing isn't discovery, it's fluency. He has a code, steps, rules about who qualifies. When he walks her through the plan for each target, he isn't brainstorming. He's onboarding her into a system that clearly predates her. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on what he's willing to do, but on how effortlessly he moves through it, as if hundreds of unseen knights are standing behind every calm instruction. At some point, he stops editing himself. He admits this need didn't start with Jordan Chase. He doesn't give her a full body count, but he gives her enough. Harry, the code, the training, the fact that these kill rooms are not a new invention. Lumen connects the dots. There is a history of bodies she'll never know, a trajectory of violence that was in motion long before she was pulled into that barrel. Her first reaction is exactly what her trauma psychology would predict: shock, a jolt of fear. We see her step back, eyes scanning the same knives that once meant her death. Every survival instinct screams that this is the precise kind of man you run from, not toward. If he can do this so calmly, what stops him from turning on her the second she's inconvenient? But then, she weighs it. Every time he didn't kill her, when his plan would have made that the safest option. Every time he believed her without proof. Every time he put his own freedom at risk to protect her, to correct a failure, to go back into danger he could have walked away from. Dangerous? Yes. Arbitrary? No. That distinction is everything. The men who hurt her were dangerous without rules, driven by entitlement and pleasure. Dexter is dangerous within rules. His control is real, even if we know from other seasons that it's fragile. For Lumen, that difference is the thin line between predator and weapon. And then there's the honesty. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to how lies drive Dexter's collapse, but with Lumen. He finally stops pretending. No suburban fantasy, no performance of normal, just brutal transparency about what he is. Ironically, that makes him feel safer to her than the good men who might minimize her pain, doubt her story, or insist on a healing arc she's not ready to live. So her trust doesn't shatter, it clarifies. She is not looking for a safe, normal man. She is looking for someone whose darkness aligns with her need for justice, at least for now. And now she can see exactly what she's harnessing. The ominous twist is that this is fully informed consent. Lumen is not mistaken about who Dexter is. She chooses him anyway. Which leaves us with a more unsettling question than can she trust him? Instead, we have to ask, once the list is finished, once the killing stops being about her, how long can that choice actually hold? So why does that choice hold at all? Why does a woman who wakes up on a kill table, staring at plastic and knives, decide that the man who put her there is safer than the world outside those walls? To keep this clear, we have to sit in Lumen's perspective. From Boyd's warehouse on, the investigation she's running in her own head is simple. When did he have the chance to end me? And what did he do instead? He could have killed her the second she opened her eyes. He doesn't. He could have disappeared after letting her go. Instead, he tracks her, stops her from getting herself killed with that clumsy hotel attack, and repeatedly steps into chaos to pull her out. Every failed plan in Season 5, the botched camp rescue, the Jordan Chase confrontation that spirals, becomes more data. When things collapse, Dexter doesn't cut and run. He shields her, shares information, hands her the knife, and lets her decide how much blood she's willing to spill. That's not how normal life has treated her. Out there, the plan is, call the police, trust the system, wait for justice. But Lumen knows what those systems do to women like her. Cops who doubt the story. Courts that plea bargain monsters down. Friends and family who can handle the word assault in the abstract, but not the reality of barrels, chains, and recorded screams. In that world, she is either a case file or a burden. With Dexter, she is an active agent. This is where the twisted safety kicks in. Dexter believes her immediately and completely. No skepticism. No probing questions about what she might have done to provoke it. He has the precise skills to neutralize the specific men who still hunt her. Surveillance, forensics, a code that laser focuses his violence on the names on her list. And crucially, he does not flinch at the darkness she now carries. When she shakes with rage on the kill table, when she drives the knife into her abuser, he doesn't look away. He calibrates around it. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this psychological logic. After extreme trauma, safe doesn't mean good. It means predictable, competent in danger, aligned with your immediate survival. By that metric, Dexter is more reliable than any therapist, any detective, any well-meaning relative. His control issues, his meticulous rituals, the very code that failed so many others, all line up with what she needs right now. But there's a limit baked into that trust. It's mission-based. As long as there are men left to kill, their partnership makes sense. Once the list is finished, the external enemies vanish, and the structure that justifies his presence starts to dissolve. The central question shifts. What does Lumen do with a serial killer in a world that no longer requires killing? And that's where the fracture is already waiting. The traits that make Dexter the perfect ally in violence, his compulsion, his comfort with death, his lifelong attachment to the hunt, make him a terrible candidate for the peaceful future she might eventually want. Lumen has chosen the monster who saved her over the world that failed her. But what happens when she no longer needs a monster at all, and the only real danger left is the life they've built together? Lumen's question hangs over that fragile future like a blade. What happens when the monster she chose is the only thing left standing? To keep this clear, we have to jump back to the moment that choice actually becomes possible. The instant Dexter's carefully edited version of himself explodes in front of her. We're in the world of the barrels. Rotting oil drums, cataloged victims, the investigation closing in. When Lumen sees the crime scene photos, the storage, the sheer scale of the Barrel Girl crimes, and realizes Dexter has been tracking these men long before she even knew their names, his plan to keep her in a controlled half-truth bubble collapses. She doesn't just see a man who saved her from Boyd. She sees a hunter who has been operating in the shadows, adjacent to her suffering, long before their stories intersected. Dexter thought information was the threat. He believed that if Lumen saw the full pattern, if she understood the code, the kill rooms, the bodies in the ocean, she'd panic, run, or expose him. So, he rationed the truth, one abuser at a time, one justified kill at a time. But for a trauma survivor, that drip feed is its own form of terror. Random sounds, random men, random violence, no structure. When the barrels open, structure arrives. Names, dates, accomplices. Lumen goes from captive and confused to someone who can map the pattern. These are the men. This is how they operated, and this is what Dexter does to people like them. Information becomes her first real leverage. She now knows who he is, what he's done, and exactly how dangerous he can be if she crosses him. And here's Dexter's miscalculation in Season 5. Secrecy was his comfort, not hers. He thought keeping her ignorant would maintain control and safety. Instead, it kept her trapped in the same free-floating fear her captors created. Once she sees the whole horror, she can finally start making informed choices. Does she stay? Does she run? Does she weaponize this monster standing in front of her? The central question isn't, does she trust him now? It's, does she trust her read of him more than the chaos she just escaped? The revelation doesn't magically create intimacy. What it creates is a new dynamic. Lumen looks at a man she knows can kill her in seconds, and doesn't bolt. She stays in the room. She asks focused questions. Who are the others? How do we find them? What's the plan? Paradoxically, the more monstrous Dexter appears on paper, the more predictable he becomes in her psychology. He kills specific men, in specific ways, under a specific code. That predictability is the first fragile building block of trust for someone whose world has been defined by arbitrary cruelty. Watch her body language shift. Less frantic flinching, more steady eye contact. Less, are you going to hurt me? And more, how do we hurt them? Along the way, we see the partnership forming in real time. She's no longer just surviving Dexter. She's evaluating him as the most effective ally in revenge she's ever going to find. But now that she has leverage, knowledge of the barrels, the code, the Bay Harbor shape of his secret, what does she do with it? Run to the police? Expose the monster? Or bind herself to his mission so tightly that if he goes down, she takes the whole story with her? In this video, We're going to follow what she actually chooses, and why that choice seals both of their trajectories. Lumen's choice to bind herself to Dexter's mission doesn't stay theoretical for long. The moment she asks, "What happens now?" we move from abstract leverage into logistics, into a plan Dexter thinks he can still control. Let's kick things off with his blueprint. In his head, Season 5 is simple. He'll investigate, stalk, and eliminate the men who hurt her. She'll heal. She'll never see another kill room, never watch the plastic go up or the knives come out. From his perspective, that's mercy and containment in one move. Protect the victim. Protect the code. Protect the secret. But for Lumen, being protected looks a lot like being erased. The central question for her is not will they die, it's will I stay helpless? When Dexter tries to feed her vague reassurances and partial truths, she pushes back. She wants names. She wants locations. She wants to look at the monsters who turned her life into a crime scene, and she wants a role in ending them. Watching from the sidelines is just another version of the warehouse, another table she's strapped to, while men decide what happens to her body. To keep this clear, Dexter's internal conflict is brutal. Harry's ghost is still in his ear. Isolate, compartmentalize, never share the process. The code is built on distance, between Dexter and his victims, between Dexter and anyone who might see what he actually is. Yet Lumen's psychology pulls him in the opposite direction. He recognizes the look in her eyes when she talks about the men who hurt her. It's not abstract vengeance. It's the need for agency, for narrative control over a life that was stolen. So he compromises. He lets her come on a scouting run, still imagining he can choreograph every beat. He'll drive. He'll surveil. She'll sit in the passenger seat, quiet and contained, while the hunter does his work. That fantasy collapses almost immediately. In the shadows outside a target's house, Lumen flinches at every sound, whispers questions at the worst possible moments, reaches for the door when she thinks she sees one of the men. Dexter's silent stalker routine fractures into whispered arguments, aborted approaches, near exposures. The plan is a failure on paper. But watch what Dexter does with that failure. He doesn't snap. He doesn't sedate her, abandon her, or retreat back into secrecy. He adapts. He pulls her back, talks her through what he's seeing, recalibrates the timeline instead of retaliating against her panic. That's the paradox. The more his control slips, the more trustworthy he looks. Lumen tests him with volatility and fear, and he responds with information rather than punishment. By the next outing, he's explaining his process, not bragging, not performing, but giving her cognitive structure around the violence, how he chooses a kill room, how he tracks patterns, how he confirms guilt. Each detail is a brick in a strange kind of safety, if she can understand the machinery. It can't swallow her whole. The first hunt doesn't go to plan. It's messy, delayed, emotionally chaotic. Yet, in that wreckage, Lumen gets proof of something no speech could offer. Dexter will bend his methods around her instead of forcing her into his mold. And once she believes that, the door opens to something even more dangerous than shared scouting, a shared kill. The shared kill arrives in a room that, for Dexter, feels almost comforting. Plastic everywhere, tools laid out with surgical symmetry, a body secured, a confession queued up in his head. This is the environment where he believes the plan, the code, and his control finally line up. Let's kick things off from his side of the plastic. Stalk the target. Confirm the victims. Prepare the kill room. Leave no evidence. He tapes up the walls, arranges the knives, sets out the blood slides. The scripted dialogue is already forming. The litany of sins, the reveal of the trophies, the calm explanation that this is justice, not chaos. For Dexter, this ritual is his investigation, trial, and execution compressed into one clean tableau. But the focus is not just on what Dexter builds, it's on what that construction does to Lumen. Because when we cut to her perspective, the same plastic becomes a sensory minefield. The crinkle under her feet, the chemical sting in the air, the muffled echoes off the walls. Dexter's control smells like the warehouse where she was held. His knives sound like the ones that carved into her. What he experiences as a controlled procedure, she experiences as a live reenactment. In this video, we're going to stay with that collision. The central question in this moment is simple. When his ritual hurts her, what does he protect? His process or her mind? The answer doesn't arrive in theory. It arrives when the plan finally breaks. The failure starts small. Lumen's breathing spikes. Her eyes lock on the victim's body, then on Dexter's gloved hands. She flinches at the sound of tape ripping. Then she moves. Maybe she grabs his arm mid-speech. Maybe she blurts out a plea or a memory that doesn't fit the script. Maybe she physically steps between Dexter and the man on the table. However we frame it, the effect is the same. She shatters the choreography Harry drilled into him. To keep this clear, this is the exact point where old Dexter would push through. Finish the monologue. Hit the mark. Preserve the ritual. Instead, he edits himself in real time. The speech shortens. The theatrics vanish. He rushes the confrontation or ends it faster than he ever would alone, because every extra second is another second of Lumen reliving her torture. For Lumen, that deviation is seismic. Her abusers never stopped when she screamed. Their ritual was indifferent to her pain. Dexter, the serial killer she should fear most, is the first man in this entire season of her life who actually changes his behavior because she's in distress. That is not forgiveness. That is pattern recognition at the level of survival psychology. Afterward, the room is quiet, but Lumen isn't. She's shaking, adrenaline drunk, waiting for the consequences, anger, blame, abandonment. Instead, Dexter goes into quiet damage control. He offers water. He gives her space. He doesn't demand gratitude or a debrief. No grand gesture, no speech about what they just did. Just muted. Practical care that reads as safe precisely because it isn't performative. Along the way, Lumen has now seen both faces of Dexter's control, the lethal precision and the willingness to bend. Two sides of the same knife. The next step is deciding which edge she believes in and what it will cost her if she's wrong. Two sides of the same knife. And Dexter really believes he can sheath one while wielding the other. This is where his favorite fantasy takes over. The plan where he can be a full-time, avenging angel with Lumen and still clock in as Miami Metro's blood guy, part-time husband, part-time dad. In this video, we're going to see how that fantasy slams into the drywall of reality at a cheap roadside motel. Fluorescent lights, faded bedspreads, a door that never quite shuts right. Dexter sells it to himself as a controlled environment, a safe house, where Lumen can disappear while his regular life hums along untouched. To keep this clear, this is not just a hiding place. It's his attempt to build a bubble where the investigation at work, the bedtime stories at home, and the kill list with Lumen never intersect. On paper, it looks neat. Anonymous check-in, cash payments, a woman in trauma tucked away while he rotates between crime scenes, family dinners, and nocturnal recon. Control through compartmentalization. But domestic life doesn't respect his compartments. It leaks. We watch the intrusion start small. Phone calls from the nanny while he's cleaning blood in the bathroom. A store acting out. A neighbor needing a favor. Each ring of his phone cuts through that fragile bubble, forcing him to juggle Lumen's panic with Harrison's fevers and Rita's lingering expectations. Short call, short lie. Long-term consequences. Then the motel itself starts pushing back. A housekeeper lingers too long outside the door. A manager clocks how often this single guest has company. A patrol car cruises the lot just as Dexter is hauling supplies. The central question becomes obvious. How long can he keep this place off the grid when everything about his life pulls attention toward it? The failure point is a near discovery that strips the illusion. A staff member walks in at the wrong moment, or law enforcement brushes too close, and suddenly Dexter is improvising, snapping into killroom instincts just to preserve the fiction that Lumen doesn't exist. The safe house reveals itself as anything but safe. Lumen feels that crack instantly. She sees the way his eyes flick to his phone, how he calculates whether to answer a call from home while she's shaking on the bed. If his attention is divided now, what happens when Jordan Chase escalates, when Deb's investigation tightens? From her psychology, divided loyalty isn't neutral, it's lethal. Abusers chose themselves. Systems chose convenience. That's the pattern she knows. So the turning point lands with brutal clarity. Dexter chooses a call he doesn't take, an event he doesn't show up for, a cover story he deliberately burns. He lets a family obligation implode so he can stay at that motel door, body between Lumen and the world. It's a small domestic collapse that signals a massive reordering of his priorities. And paradoxically, the more his normal life degrades, the more stable he looks to her. Who else has ever thrown away comfort to keep her alive? The focus is not just on what he does for her, but on what he's willing to lose because of her. Along the way, the walls of Dexter's world start to visibly buckle. If they finally give way, is Lumen standing behind a shield or under the rubble with him? And that question doesn't stay hypothetical for long. The universe of Dexter never lets a fragile equilibrium sit. It sends a knock at the door. A motel manager with a clipboard, a neighbor with a casserole, a cop with just a few questions about noise and strange comings and goings. Any one of them is enough to expose a traumatized blonde in Dexter Morgan's orbit who absolutely should not exist. Let's kick things off with Dexter's default plan. He'll handle it. He always handles it. She stays in the bathroom, behind the curtain, under the bed. He steps into the hallway, into the doorway, into the fluorescent lobby, and does what he's trained himself to do since Harry. Control the narrative, manage the investigation, keep the code and the blood off the official record. Lumen doesn't need to speak. She just needs to disappear. In this video, we're going to sit in the gap between that confidence and what actually happens. Because the plan fails. It has to. The manager spots Lumen's reflection in a window. A neighbor sees her slip out to the car. A patrol officer hears a second voice and leans in. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer just Dexter's performance. It's a scene with two leads. To keep this clear, watch the micro-montage in your head. Dexter's polite smile tightens. The questions sharpen. Is someone else in there? A door opens a little too wide. Lumen is caught in the frame, pupils blown, body coiled. For a heartbeat, we can feel Dexter's illusion of total control collapse. He cannot edit her out of this interaction. If she panics, if she tells the truth, if she even hesitates, years of careful compartmentalization detonate in a single awkward answer. And then she lies. Not just for herself, but for him. She echoes his story about a visiting relative, a flu, a bad breakup. She adds a detail he hasn't supplied yet, a fake name that matches the registration. A mention of his job at the lab that explains the late hours, a shared timeline that seals the alibi. She does not reach for the easiest exit, which would be throwing Dexter under the bus and begging the system to save her. She synchronizes instead. Psychologically, this is enormous. Lying to a motel employee is one thing. Lying in front of a badge, a notepad. A potential witness is self-incrimination. The focus is not just on the content of the lie, but on the risk profile. Lumen is now wagering prison time. Her credibility, her entire post-trauma trajectory on Dexter's competence not to let that lie unravel under deeper investigation. Who does that for a man she met on a kill table? Dexter feels it. There's a flicker, surprise, then respect, as he realizes she is no longer a protected witness in his private crusade. She's a co-conspirator who can think on her feet, adapt under pressure, and hold the line with him rather than against him. Along the way, her fear rewires. The unpredictable variable is no longer Dexter, it's the outside world. Cops, neighbors, systems become the threat. Dexter becomes the interpreter, the shield, the one person who can teach her how to survive in this hostile landscape of questions and forms. So, if they can improvise a cover story this smoothly when the stakes are a suspicious glance, what happens when the pressure escalates to a full-blown task force? A manhunt? A warehouse surrounded by sirens? How long can a trust built on shared deception hold before the next plan fails even harder? And that's exactly where the universe answers our question, by dropping a bigger predator into the frame. Jordan Chase doesn't slink through alleys or hide behind dumpsters. He stands on stages. He sells empowerment in bottled water and catchphrases. From the moment his self-help mantra echoes through Lumen's world again, he becomes the embodiment of everything her nervous system now equates with death, charisma, money, public adoration wrapped around private sadism. He's what happens when the monster doesn't need the dark at all. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on Chase as a villain, but on what his visibility does to Dexter's illusion of control. Up to this point in the season, Dexter's plan is familiar: identify the individual abusers, stalk them, isolate them, kill them. Clean, contained, almost comfortingly procedural. Then he realizes the ringleader is a celebrity with security, lawyers, fans, and a brand. Dexter tries to paste his usual lone wolf tactics onto a man who lives under constant surveillance, and we can already feel the gap between method and reality opening. For Lumen, the first real contact with Chase after her escape is not a fight scene. It's a sound. His voice on a recording. His image on a screen. A hotel corridor where his cologne lingers. Those tiny sensory hits collapse time, dragging her straight back to the barrel, to the camp, to the chanting. Her body locks up, breathing shortens. She is not just scared of him. Her entire fear map is redrawn with his face at the center. Dexter misreads that map. His instinct is containment. He thinks if he handles Chase personally, he can shield Lumen from that psychological gravity, keep her focused on the next name, the next location, the next piece of the investigation. It's a classic Dexter move. Protect by excluding, by deciding unilaterally what she can handle. But this is the failure baked into his code all over again. He doesn't understand that as long as Chase is out there, Lumen's world can never shrink back to something survivable. The turning point comes when Lumen actually sees Dexter stand up to Chase, not as a shadow in the background, but in direct orbit. A tense conversation at the camp, a veiled threat in a hotel hallway, a covert maneuver that undercuts Chase's sense of invincibility. In that moment, Dexter stops being just the man who cleans up bodies after the fact. He becomes someone willing to walk toward the source of her nightmare. And here's the paradox. Facing a more powerful monster makes Dexter look smaller on the cosmic scale, but more reliable in Lumen's immediate reality. He can't control the whole system. Yet he's clearly aiming at the apex predator, rather than nibbling at the edges. That shift upgrades her trust. Now, she's not satisfied with picking off low-level participants. She wants the architect, and Dexter is the only one reckless enough to agree. We see it in her questions. Instead of, "Are we safe tonight?" we get, "When does Chase travel alone? Who's on his security detail? Where are the blind spots?" This is no longer about surviving the next 24 hours. This is long-term strategy. Partnership, a shared trajectory, aimed straight at the man who built her prison. But stepping into Chase's orbit is not a local escalation. It's existential. If they miscalculate here, there is no quiet way out, no simple cover story, no convenient scapegoat. In this video, we're going to watch how that decision doesn't just raise the stakes of their mission, it starts the countdown on Dexter's entire fantasy of control. So when they finally lock on to Jordan Chase and the men who helped him, Dexter does what he always does when the stakes spike. He retreats into a private blueprint. Names in a row. Order of attack. Disposal sites. In his head, this is another Bay Harbor butcher operation, just with a more vocal beneficiary. Lumen is data, motive, and witness. She is not, in his initial plan, a co-author. He lays it out like a contractor walking a client through a remodel. Here's who we start with. Here's how we minimize exposure. Here's where you stand and when you leave. To keep this clear, Dexter is trying to preserve the one domain where he still believes in perfect control, logistics. But Lumen has already woken up on his table, already watched him improvise when the code collided with a living survivor. She knows how fragile that fantasy is. So, she pushes back. Hard. She wants to decide who dies first. She wants the man who hurt her worst, the one whose voice still echoes in her head, not some abstract weakest link Dexter has flagged from phone records and surveillance. She wants to choose how they're confronted, how much she's willing to risk, how close she gets to the violence. She refuses to be the passive endpoint in his flowchart, a variable he plugs in after the real planning is done. Dexter hates this. We can feel it in the way his face tightens, in the clipped way he explains why you always start with the easiest target. Strategic control is his safety blanket. Stalk, confirm, kill, clean, no witnesses, no improvisation, no committee meetings. Letting someone else touch that plan feels, to his psychology, like inviting chaos into the only area of his life that has ever made sense. But the central question here is simple. If he doesn't share power now, does he actually trust her at all? So, we watch the negotiation, beat by beat. Lumen argues from scar tissue and memory. The order matters because her healing is not linear. Dexter argues from risk matrices and forensics. The order matters because the investigation will close in on their weakest point. They circle. They clash. And then they land on a hybrid. They start with a softer target, but one Lumen personally remembers. They build contingencies around her presence. They design exit routes that satisfy his paranoia and her need to stand in the room. This compromise is a hinge. Dexter silently admits that her psychological needs carry equal weight to his operational logic. Lumen, in turn, concedes that his kill room expertise is not just control freak theater, it keeps them alive. And we hear the shift immediately. Dexter starts saying "we" when he talks about the plan. Lumen starts mirroring his language about timelines, contingencies, exposure. The focus is not just on catching Chase. It's on Lumen reclaiming something the torture stole. She isn't only taking back her body, she's taking back the right to make high-stakes decisions without being punished. Dexter, for once, does not re-traumatize that impulse. He makes room for it. Along the way, we see a paradox emerge. The more Dexter gives up control, the more effective they become together. But there's a cost. Now that they're co-owners, every failure, every near discovery, every crack in the code will belong to both of them. And shared failure is either the fastest route to unbreakable trust or the moment their entire mission collapses in on itself. And then we hit the moment the partnership does something Dexter's code never planned for. It saves him. We're in that grim, fluorescent world of Season 5's improvised investigation. An abandoned camp, a storage site. One of those places where plastic, rust, and memory cling to every surface. Dexter is locked in. He's tracking one of Lumen's abusers. Running the familiar internal checklist, stalk the target, control the environment, leave no witnesses. It's the same ritual he's trusted for years, the same illusion of control we've been watching collapse in slow motion. But this time, he misses something. To keep this clear, the failure is small and deadly. A surveillance camera tucked higher than his usual sweep. A security guard doubling back on an irregular route. A witness stepping out to smoke at exactly the wrong time. We can pick any of those specifics. Because the psychology underneath is the same, Dexter is so fused to his solo hunter mindset, so convinced he is the apex predator in the room, that he tunes out everything that doesn't fit the plan. Lumen doesn't. She hears the crunch of gravel before he does. She spots the shadow sliding along the wall just outside the doorway. She notices the red recording light on the camera he never looks up to see. While Dexter is bent over a lock, or a trunk, or a bloodstain that confirms his suspicions, she's scanning the perimeter the way a trauma survivor does, no longer trusting the narrative, only the threat. The save happens in a heartbeat, a warning whisper cutting through his focus, fingers digging into his arm as she yanks him back from the line of sight. A diversion, dropping a tool, knocking over a shelf, stepping into the open herself to pull the guard's gaze away from the man who cannot afford to be seen. 1 second, Dexter is the hunter. The next, he's the one being dragged out of the kill zone. Watch his face in that pivot. The shock isn't just at the danger, it's at the role reversal. Dexter is used to anticipating every angle of exposure. Being rescued punctures his self-image, exposes the fragility of the code Harry built, and he worships. But in the same instant, we see something rare. His eyes soften. The jaw unclenches. And he gives Lumen a verbal thank you that actually sounds like it costs him something. For Lumen, this is seismic. She straightens, shoulders back, breathing hard but steady. She's not dead weight on his mission. She is the reason he's still free, still alive, still able to continue this dark investigation. The focus is not just on her surviving anymore, but on her capacity to protect the man who has been her shield. In this video, we're going to keep returning to these mutual rescues, because this is where trust stops being theoretical. Each has now chosen the other's safety over their own in a split-second decision. That creates a feedback loop. If she can save him once, what happens the next time the danger spikes? How far will she go? And what pieces of herself will she sacrifice to keep the one person she finally believes won't betray her? Along the way, Dexter's vulnerability becomes its own paradox. The more he needs Lumen, the more invincible he looks to her. And that belief will drive the next escalation in their trajectory. And the next pressure test for that belief doesn't come from a killer in the shadows. It comes from the person who knows Dexter best. Dexter Morgan walks into this story not just as a cop on a case, but as Dexter's emotional anchor, the one relationship that keeps his normal life from completely collapsing. To keep this clear, Deb isn't just another threat of exposure. She is the only person whose opinion actually penetrates Dexter's armor. She's the kid sister he protected, the colleague whose career he quietly props up, the one human whose pain reliably cuts through the dark passenger. which means the second her investigation starts circling the Barrel Girl crimes, the danger isn't only legal, it's psychological. If Deborah connects Dexter to Lumen, the entire fiction of control he's built around family, code, and purpose detonates at once. Watch how the investigation tightens. Deborah studies those barrels, the tortured women, the pattern of missing men around Jordan Chase. She builds a clean, methodical plan: find the surviving victim, track the perpetrators, shut the operation down. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this rhythm, Deborah's legitimate police work, moving in parallel with Dexter's vigilante campaign. Two lines on a collision course that only he can see. We get those near collision moments that feel almost unbearable. Deborah arrives at Boyd Fowler's house right after Lumen has been there. She knocks on doors Lumen is literally hiding behind. She follows a lead to the camp, to the warehouse, to plastic sheeting and fresh blood and a fleeing suspect. While Dexter is inches away, cleaning up the same crime she's trying to solve. The central question becomes painfully simple. When those trajectories intersect, who does Dexter protect? Each major section will show him running triage in real time. Does he hand over evidence that would make Deborah's case? Does he steer her away from Lumen's description, bury a recording, lose a sample? Mislabel a print? Again and again, he chooses the same answer. He lies to Deborah. He misdirects her investigation. He physically blocks her from the truth, most brutally in that warehouse finale, where he and Lumen stand behind the plastic while Deborah, inches away, decides to let the vigilantes go. Lumen sees all of this, even if she doesn't catch every forensic detail. From her perspective, a cop's sister, a homicide detective, is chasing the exact men who hurt her. The system is finally working, and Dexter is actively sabotaging it for her. What does it mean when a man is willing to betray blood family and the law to keep your name out of a file? This is the paradoxical accelerant. By choosing Lumen over Deborah's career and moral clarity, Dexter becomes more trustworthy to Lumen, not less. She watches him destroy leads, shoulder suspicion, absorb Deborah's growing frustration, and she understands the cost. She isn't just a partner now, she's the wedge being driven into the only relationship that truly loves him back. Along the way, the consequences sharpen. Dexter's guilt deepens. Deborah's anger simmers. And Lumen realizes that if Deborah ever pierces this illusion of control, the first target won't be Dexter. It will be the woman who made him choose. That trust is real. It's also a countdown. That countdown really starts to accelerate the moment Dexter's most sacred constant begins to wobble, the code. Because from Lumen's perspective, that code is not abstract philosophy. It's the operating system she watches him run every single night. To keep this clear, Lumen learns the rules as procedure. Only kill killers. Confirm the evidence. No innocence, no improvisation, no emotion. Stalk the target, verify the pattern, prepare the kill room. It looks like ritual, but she slowly understands it as a fragile structure holding his psychology together. If the code breaks, the whole illusion of control might collapse with it. And then she pushes right at that fault line. We see it most clearly around Cole Harmon, the enforcer at Jordan Chase's side, the man who kept order at the torture site, who watched and facilitated even if we never see him on camera during her assaults. For Dexter, the investigation isn't finished. Cole's proximity screams guilt, but the blood, the trophies, the hard proof he normally demands, they're thin. The code wants patience. Lumen wants him dead. Dexter resists. Out loud, he frames it as process. They need more confirmation, a better plan, a cleaner opportunity. Internally, we feel him clinging to Harry's rules like a life raft. If he starts killing on association, What separates him from the chaos Harry feared? What happens to every careful line that kept Deborah, Rita, Harrison safe in earlier seasons? But Lumen is shaking, replaying the warehouse, insisting Cole was there, that his hands were on her, that waiting is another form of abandonment. Her need is not hypothetical. It's immediate, bodily, unbearable, and for once, Dexter's calculation tilts away from purity and toward mercy. He accelerates. He moves on Cole before the code is fully satisfied, before every question is answered, before every safeguard is in place. He brings Lumen into the confrontation, lets her see, lets her participate in the kill he would usually isolate and sterilize. The plan is messier, the risk higher, the evidence trail looser than he tolerates anywhere else in the series. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this pattern. Dexter choosing a person over a principle. For Lumen, this is the proof. If the code were truly sacred, she would be secondary. Instead, she watches him contaminate his own system to prioritize her healing. He bends the one structure he claims he can't live without just so she can breathe again. Here's the paradox. For most of us, someone breaking their rules makes them less trustworthy. For Lumen, watching Dexter override his programming for her sake reads as the highest form of commitment. If he'll risk his moral scaffolding, what won't he risk? And the consequences linger. Dexter is visibly unsettled after Cole, second-guessing, replaying the shortcuts. Lumen feels relief braided with guilt, knowing she pulled him over a line. They don't say it, but both understand they've crossed into a new trajectory together. The code is no longer unbreakable. It's negotiable. So if Dexter can bend the code for Lumen here, what happens when she asks for something the code absolutely forbids? He bends the code for her in the warehouse. On the surface, that looks like the wildest thing he'll ever offer. But the moment that really seals Lumen's trust doesn't happen under plastic. It happens under open sky. Let's kick things off with that visual contrast. We move from fluorescent lights and drainable floors to a quiet dock, wood planks breathing under their weight, water lapping against pylons. No knives laid out, no trophies. Just Dexter and Lumen sitting side by side, the mission on pause, adrenaline finally bleeding off. In this video, we're going to treat that stillness as its own investigation, because the central question for Lumen isn't will he kill for me, it's who is he when we're not killing. She tests that directly. She doesn't ask how he wraps plastic or how he avoids detection. She asks why. Why keep doing this after Rita? What does he actually feel in the moment the blade goes in? What does he get out of this beyond the story he tells himself about justice and control? These are not tactical questions. They're psychological ones, designed to see if his inner world lines up with what she's seen on the tables. To keep this clear, Dexter's answers here are unusually candid. He admits the emptiness, that for most of his life, killing was the only thing that cut through the numbness. He talks about Rita not as a perfect cover, but as a life he wanted to want, a plan for normalcy that collapsed the night she died. He even confesses confusion about her, about Lumen, about why her pain won't file itself away like every other victim's photo on his wall. He doesn't label it love, he doesn't have language for it at all. And that honesty about his confusion is the tell. Because the focus is not just on whether he cares, it's on whether he'll lie about caring. A traditional love confession would almost be easier to dismiss. She's not looking for a romance arc. She's looking for consistency. Do his words match the way he covered for her at the camp? The way he let her decide what happened to each man? Or is there a gap between his story and his behavior that signals another predator? Lumen meets that risk with her own. Along the way, she shares more of the captivity than we've heard before, the small humiliations, the moments she wished she wouldn't wake up. She admits survivor's guilt, that every day free feels stolen from women who never got out. She voices the fear she's been circling since Boyd, that hunting them, enjoying their fear, means she's becoming like them. These are emotionally incriminating details. In the wrong hands, they're leverage. That's the quiet contract. Each now holds something the other could weaponize. He could frame her as unhinged. She could expose his entire code. Instead, they let those confessions just sit between them, unexploited. For a torture survivor, that restraint is proof. The monster who names himself as a monster feels safer than the men who called themselves friends. His darkness is on the table, not hidden behind charm or respectability, and that paradox is exactly why she can finally exhale. For a moment on that dock, it feels like they could stay there indefinitely, suspended between bloodshed and aftermath, two people who see each other too clearly to pretend. But the list isn't finished. Jordan Chase is still out there, and the world, with its investigations and consequences, has no intention of letting this liminal peace last. That dockside calm doesn't last, because the world rushes back in with something even more destabilizing than danger. An exit. A real one. Not a fantasy of healing, not a vague promise of someday, but a concrete plan to disappear before Jordan Chase even realizes Lumen is alive. In this video, we're going to sit with that crossroads, because this is where her trust in Dexter stops being about survival and becomes allegiance. We watch Dexter quietly assemble the escape route the way he'd build a kill room. Methodical, precise, a clean passport, cash, a safe contact who owes him, a flight out that threads the gap between Chase's surveillance and Miami Metro's investigation. To keep this clear, Dexter isn't trapping her. He's opening the door as wide as he can. He tells her she can go. He doesn't threaten. He doesn't guilt her. He does something rarer for him than murder. He offers to lose control on purpose. If she leaves, his plan against Chase gets harder, maybe impossible. But for once, the code bends toward her life over his mission. On paper, this is the rational choice. New name, new city, no more blood. And yet, for Lumen, that rational voice is only half the story. The other half is the room she woke up in with Boyd Fowler, the barrels at the camp, the recordings of Chase turning her pain into a self-help slogan. How do you board a plane while those men still breathe? What does safety even mean if your nightmares keep replaying the moment you were powerless? We see that conflict in her body before we hear it in her words. She holds the passport, fingers the edge of the ticket, stands in a doorway where one step forward means customs lines and witness protection shadows, and one step back means knives, plastic, and Jordan Chase. The central question isn't just will she run, it's can she live with herself if she does? The decision point lands in a single, simple gesture. She turns away. Maybe she folds the ticket and presses it back into Dexter's hand. Maybe she rips it, a small paper echo of every bridge she's burning. Either way, she physically destroys the means of escape. No backup plan. No alternate trajectory. She is not being held here. She is choosing. And that choice tells us everything about how far her trust has evolved. She believes Dexter can get her to the end of this path alive more than she believes in any anonymous new life without closure. It's a brutal paradox. The least safe option on paper is the only one that feels like it leads away from perpetual victimhood. With a serial killer, she finally feels like something other than prey. Dexter's reaction is its own quiet collapse. There's dread. He knows what staying with him costs. But there's also a grim affirmation. She's not staying because she's afraid of him. She's staying because she believes in him. From this moment on, there is no off-ramp. Lumen hasn't just joined the mission against Chase. She's made it her only possible future. Which means every failure from here will hit with the force of a life sentence. So when we drop into the warehouse, we're not just changing locations. We're watching that life sentence get tested under live fire. This isn't a random brawl. It's a plan. Dexter maps it like he always does. A derelict storage warehouse tied to Jordan Chase's operation. One of Chase's key men, scheduled to move evidence and supplies. Entry through a side door with a broken camera. Exit through a loading bay that backs onto the water. Backup routes through the maze of crates. Stalk, observe, strike, leave no trace. On paper, it's pure control. To keep this clear, Dexter builds contingencies the way Harry taught him. If Chase himself shows, Dexter adapts. If the target brings muscle, Dexter has syringes, plastic, and a timed window before any investigation. Lumen's role is simple. Stay in the shadows, follow his signals, do not improvise. Her safety, he believes, is just another variable he can manage. Then the door slams behind them, and the variables multiply. Extra cars outside, footsteps that don't match the schedule, a red recording light on a camera that should be dead. In a few seconds, Hunter and Hunted flip places. The operation is a trap. Chase's men flooding the floor with flashlights and guns, their own surveillance system turning Dexter's neat blueprint into a cage. Gunshots crack against metal. Voices ricochet in the dark. The smell of oil, dust, and cordite thickens the air. Lumen senses overload. Every shout feels like it has her name in it. This is the exact nightmare her trauma wired into her. Enclosed space, male voices closing in, no clear exit. Her body wants to do what it did in that barrel room. Freeze or bolt blindly and blow the plan completely. This is where Dexter's psychology shifts into command mode. No debate, no gentle reassurance. Short sentence. Longer elaboration. Down, now, he shoves her behind a stack of pallets, using his own body as moving cover. A flashlight beam sweeps past where she was standing seconds earlier. He tells her to run toward the sound of approaching men, to cross open ground instead of hugging the walls. It feels suicidal. It's the only path that keeps them out of the camera's line of sight. The central question in this moment is brutal. Does Lumen trust her instincts, or Dexter's map of a battlefield she can't fully see? She chooses him. She moves when he says move, ducks when he yanks her down, holds her breath because he taps her shoulder once. She doesn't understand the full picture. She bets that his situational awareness outruns her fear. And it pays off in inches. A bullet slams into a crate where her head used to be. A guard races past their hiding spot because Dexter calculated the blind angle between two cameras. In the chaos, he still grabs a crucial hard drive, evidence that can nail Chase, because he told her to wait 3 extra seconds instead of sprinting for the exit. Along the way, the focus is not just on survival, but on what that survival proves. Dexter's plan has clearly failed, yet his improvisation gets her through the collapse alive. They spill out the loading bay, lungs burning, sirens already distant. They've survived, but barely, and the ledger between them has changed. Lumen hasn't just trusted Dexter not to hurt her. She's trusted him with the exact space where her life has always fallen apart. From here on, every warehouse, every dark room carries that memory. When everything went wrong, she handed him her fear, and he got her out. The next morning doesn't look like victory. It looks like a cheap room, thin light through plastic blinds, and Lumen waking up before she moves a single muscle. Her eyes open first. Her body stays locked. She does what she's trained herself to do since the barrels. Scan the ceiling. Track the shadows. Listen for footsteps in the hall, for a key in the lock, for the small changes in air that used to mean another man entering the room. Her mind is already running an investigation before she remembers she's supposed to be safe. The exits come next. Door, bathroom window. The heavy dresser she's already measured in her head. Could she wedge it? Could she break past it? How long would it take? This is the plan her nervous system lives in now. Assume failure. Assume collapse. Assume no one is coming. And then she sees him. Dexter, half asleep in a chair, shoes still on, head tipped back at an awkward angle. No restraints, no weapons in his hands, just there. And we watch the micro shift in her body. Her shoulders drop a fraction. The breath she didn't realize she was holding leaves her chest. The room is not safer because it's empty. It's safer because he's in it. That's the paradox we need to sit with. In this video, we're going to keep circling this exact contradiction. Because the central question isn't just when did Lumen trust Dexter, but why her fear system rewired itself to treat a serial killer as a safety signal. Intellectually, she knows what he is. She met him on a kill table. She's seen the knives, the plastic, the code in action. But her body has new data now. To keep this clear, we can break it down. First, predictability. The men who hurt her smiled, joked, blended into normal life. Their power came from surprise. Dexter is the opposite. His darkness is scheduled, ritualized, almost bureaucratic. He tells her the plan. He explains the evidence. When things go wrong at the camp or the hotel, he doesn't vanish. He adapts in front of her, always angling the danger away from her. Second, his track record. Every major failure in Season 5, every botched tale, every near exposure, ends the same way for Lumen. She's still alive, because Dexter moved toward the threat, not away. Third, his lack of sexual interest. In a story built on sexualized violence, Dexter's gaze is clinical. He looks at blood patterns, tire tracks, phone records. He centers her needs over his rituals, letting her choose methods, timing, even whether a kill happens at all. Normal life, by contrast, feels lethal. Systems that should protect her have already failed. Smiles are camouflage. Polite men are the real monsters. With Dexter, the danger is visible, named, and pointed outward. So when they share cold takeout in silence, or trade a dry, exhausted joke about cleaning up, it lands with more intimacy than any fantasy romance could. These are two people whose bond is measured in bodies not found and nights survived. She hasn't forgotten what he is. She's concluded that what he is makes him uniquely qualified to guard the ruins of her world. But even here, the clock is ticking. This fragile sense of control only exists as long as the list does, and that list is almost finished. The list is almost finished, and that's exactly when the real danger peaks. Because now, Lumen isn't just standing under Dexter's umbrella of control, she's handcuffed to it. If it snaps, she goes down with him. To keep this clear, let's inventory what she's actually put on the line. By the time they close in on Jordan Chase, Lumen isn't a bystander to Dexter's plan. She is a full accomplice. She lures targets, helps restrain them, stands in kill rooms wrapped in plastic that screams premeditation. She disposes of evidence, lies to Miami Metro, and walks through active crime scenes knowing exactly what really happened. Each body on that table is a potential life sentence for her. If Dexter misses one trace, one camera, one witness, the investigation that follows doesn't just end his freedom. It buries hers. But the tangible crimes are only half the cost. The focus is not just on legal consequences, but on what this trust does to her psychology. Lumen is staking her fragile recovery on the belief that justice can exist inside this blood-soaked workaround, that she can stand in a kill room without becoming what hurt her. Her sense of self, her right to ever feel clean again, is now braided into Dexter's code. If his justification collapses, so does the story she's using to survive. Earlier in the season, she moved carefully. She tested him with small questions, partial truths, trial runs where she could still run, still call the police, still disappear. That phase is over. There is no second protector waiting in the wings, no therapist who knows the full truth, no alternate path to closure. She has told no one. She has burned every bridge that doesn't end at Dexter's door. This isn't incremental trust anymore. It's absolute. It's all in. And that makes the psychological gamble brutal. If Dexter betrays her, or simply fails, it won't just confirm her worst fears about men as predators and protectors as liars. It will retroactively poison every moment of safety she's felt with him. Every late-night planning session, every heartbeat she calmed because Dexter has a plan, flips into a fresh layer of violation. Was she ever safe, or just conveniently useful to another monster? Notice the asymmetry here. Dexter risks exposure, prison, the collapse of his double life. But he has lived inside danger for years. He has contingency plans, practiced lies, a numb familiarity with the possibility of failure. For Lumen, this is her one shot to rewrite her trajectory from victim to avenger. If this collapses, there is no reboot. Just confirmation that even her most courageous attempt at control was another trap. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this pattern. Trust in Dexter as a tragic bet. Necessary in the moment. Unsustainable long-term. Purchased with irreversible compromises. Lumen's arc distills that theme into something almost unbearable. Even if Dexter never consciously turns on her, the world they live in, law, family, fate, cannot let this partnership stand. She has pushed all her chips onto Dexter's square. The only questions left are whether the mission will succeed, and what, if anything, will be left of her trust when the killing stops. And Lumen doesn't just wait to see what's left. She builds a test. A controlled experiment in a very uncontrolled space. That wrecked hotel room right after one of their first kills together. We're still in the echo of adrenaline. Plastic torn down, blood in the air, the body cooling on the floor while sirens whine somewhere far away. Lumen is shaking, pupils blown, nervous system still convinced she's the one about to die. Dexter, meanwhile, snaps straight into procedure. For him, this is a plan, not a panic. Stash the tools, dismantle the scene, move the body, check for trace. He treats collapse like a checklist. And that contrast is exactly where she starts pushing. When he tells her to wait outside, she refuses. She plants herself in the middle of the chaos, almost daring him to drag her out. When he starts wrapping the body, she doesn't politely avert her eyes. She moves closer. How did he learn this? Why that knife? Why the plastic? Each question is a probe, an investigation into his psychology as much as his method. Is this a man following a code, or a predator savoring the aftermath? To keep this clear, Lumen is not just curious. She is collecting data. Does he snap when challenged? Does he bark orders, call her a liability, shove her into a corner the way her captors did? Or does he let her exist as a full, frightened, infuriating person in the middle of his sacred ritual? Dexter's responses are almost unnervingly steady. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't weaponize his expertise. Instead, he walks her through the steps in that flat, practical tone we've heard all season. Here's why he bleeds the body. Here's how he avoids evidence. Here's why they can't leave yet. The focus is not just on efficiency. It's on making sure she understands what the consequences will be if either of them loses control. Then she pushes the line. Hovering over the wrapped corpse, she asks the central question, "Do you enjoy this?" That moment could go a dozen ways. He could lie, he could deflect, he could turn it back on her and ask why she's still here. Instead, he gives an answer that is messy, uncomfortable, and crucially, not tailored to soothe her. He admits there is something in him that needs this. That the killing isn't just a favor to her. It's not triumphant. It's not seductive. It's almost ashamed. And paradoxically, that honesty is safer than any clean denial. He's not gaslighting what she's seeing with her own eyes. He's not rewriting reality to keep her compliant. He lets the ugliness stand between them and still keeps explaining the plan. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this hotel room because it's more than a cleanup scene. It's a gauntlet. Lumen is not just afraid he might kill her. She's afraid he'll use her pain as fuel, fold her into his myth, then erase her once she's no longer useful. Dexter passes this round by doing 3 things her abusers never did. He gives her information, he gives her room to feel whatever she's feeling, and he applies 0 sexual or emotional pressure in a space that could easily tilt that way. But trust, for Lumen, is not a single yes or no. It's a moving trajectory. When they finally leave that room, she's more convinced he won't hurt her. What she still doesn't know, and what will drive her next wave of tests, is whether he'll stay when the mission gets messy, or whether Dexter Morgan's need for control will eventually demand her disappearance too. So the next real test doesn't happen under plastic. It happens under fluorescent lights. Dexter thinks he can keep the worlds separate. Lumen in the shadows, blood work in the lab, family in the sun. But the central question of Season 5 is what happens when that plan fails on contact with reality. And the first collision is almost mundane. A crime scene call right in the middle of Lumen's spiral. He's just walked her through another wave of panic, talking about the next man on the list, when his phone cuts through the room. A body has dropped. Miami Metro needs their blood guy. To keep this clear, we're not talking about a dramatic chase or a last-minute rescue. We're talking about Dexter Morgan having to say, "I have to go to work," to the woman who woke up on his kill table. From Lumen's vantage point, what follows is disorienting. We watch her watch him. The camera lingers on Dexter under harsh lab lighting, trading small talk with Masuka, nodding along to Batista, giving Deb a mild, brotherly smile. No plastic, no knives, no dark passenger monologue, just a man labeling slides and making unthreatening eye contact. How can this be the same person who wrapped a room in plastic to carve up Boyd Fowler? In this video, we're going to lean into that paradox, because Lumen doesn't read this as proof he's a monster who can fake anything. She reads it as proof he can control it. The focus is not just on his ability to lie, but on his discipline, his restraint. The way he moves through the bullpen, like someone who has rehearsed normalcy until it became an armor he can put on and take off at will. There's a crucial slip, though. While he's home later, half in dad mode, half in cover mode, his phone buzzes again. A text about the investigation, a detail on the case. For a beat, he chooses that world. He glances at the screen instead of at Lumen, who's sitting there, still vibrating with trauma, still waiting for him to make her nightmare the priority. Her reaction is instant. If he can disappear into this bland, safe Dexter so easily, what stops him from disappearing from her? Is she just another problem to be managed until it threatens the code or the job? And then he recovers. He puts the phone down. He circles back to her, not with a vague reassurance, but with a concrete promise. The next name, the next step, a specific night and place where he will help her hunt. Each major section will keep returning to this pattern: momentary abandonment, followed by deliberate re-entry. Along the way, The contrast with her past sharpens. The men who hurt her had normal lives too, jobs, families, public faces, but they used that normalcy as camouflage to expand their violence. Dexter uses his as an anchor to contain it. By the end of this sequence, Lumen knows he can move between those worlds effortlessly. What she doesn't know yet is where she belongs in that trajectory, or whether, when those worlds finally collapse into each other, Dexter will choose her mission over his mask. And that question hangs over the next beat like a knife over plastic. Which version of Dexter is she actually standing beside? The careful suburban father, or the man who can dismember a body without his pulse changing? The first real test comes in a small, almost procedural moment. Dexter comes back from an errand tied to the investigation into the rape ring. He tells Lumen he was just checking on Boyd's van, making sure no evidence points back to them. It's plausible. It fits his usual plan to keep control of the crime scene. But what he doesn't mention is that he also tracked a new potential accomplice and found signs of another victim, evidence that the circle of men who hurt her might be wider than the list they've built. To keep this clear, the lie isn't flamboyant. It's an omission, a missing name, a skipped detail, a decision to curate reality so she doesn't sprint into danger or collapse under the weight of more trauma. In Dexter's psychology, that feels protective. In Lumen's, it rhymes with every man who said, "Don't worry, it's handled," right before the door locked. She catches it on something tiny. A stray printout left half under a file. A timestamp that doesn't match when he claims he got back. A phrase he repeats that sounds rehearsed instead of lived. Her body goes rigid before her mind fully assembles the pattern. For Lumen, lies were the operating system of her abusers. The central question snaps into focus instantly. If he can hide this, what else is he editing? We watch her spiral in real time. If Dexter can lie about another suspect, is she just another project? Another secret he'll eventually need to bury? Is this partnership real, or just a new version of the code where she's the acceptable collateral damage? Trust, for her, is not an abstract ideal. It's a survival algorithm. One wrong input, and the consequences are life or death. When she confronts him, Dexter has a choice we've seen him fail in other seasons. He could double down, gaslight the inconsistency away, weaponize her fear and say, "You're overreacting." That's what control usually looks like in his world. Instead, he stops. Admits he left something out. Explains that he found signs of another victim, that he was afraid she'd rush in alone. That his plan was to confirm the lead before dragging her into another nightmare. Crucially, he doesn't flip the blame back onto her for not trusting him. No lecture, no "after everything I've done for you," just a quiet, almost awkward transparency that feels alien in a show built on secrets. The focus is not just on the fact that he lied, but on what he does when the lie cracks open. Lumen doesn't forgive him because the omission is small. She forgives him because, under pressure, he chooses accountability over control and actually adjusts, looping her into the next step of the investigation instead of sidelining her. This becomes a stress test of their alliance. Trust here isn't the fantasy of never lying. It's the reality of how quickly you stop. Along the way, Lumen decides to stay, but a new ledger starts running quietly in the background. If he lies again, will he meet her with the same honesty, or will the mask finally drop? That question doesn't weaken her bond with him. It sharpens it, and sets up the next time Dexter's instinct to protect clashes with her need to know exactly what darkness she's walking into. That clash becomes literal the first night Lumen crosses the line from witness to weapon, from plastic glinting under fluorescent light to a man strapped to Dexter's table. This is the moment the investigation stops being abstract justice and becomes blood, breath, and choice. They've tracked one of the men from the DVDs. The evidence is airtight. Names, dates, locations. Dexter has done what he always does, turn chaos into a plan. The room is wrapped, the tools are laid out in surgical order, the photos of other victims are taped like an indictment around the table. His ritual could run on autopilot here. Stalk the target. Confirm the victims. Prepare the kill room. Leave no evidence. But there's a variable the code never accounted for. Lumen standing at the threshold. She's shaking. Her breathing stutters. She's not just looking at her attacker. She's looking at a future self she's terrified of becoming. If she kills him, does she become like him? If she doesn't, does she stay trapped in the role he wrote for her? The central question for her is not does he deserve to die, it's what will this do to me? This is where Dexter's control could easily tip into coercion. He could coach her, romanticize the kill as healing, or quietly guide her hand the way he did with Miguel. Instead, he does something we almost never see from him around a table. He steps back. To keep this clear, he lays out 3 options. She can walk away, and he'll handle it. She can stay and watch. Or she can do it herself. Then he waits. No speeches. No pressure. Just a man who lives for this moment, deliberately not taking it. When she finally moves, it's slow, almost reluctant. Her hand closes around the knife. We hear the plastic crinkle under her feet. Her eyes lock on the man who once saw her as an object, not a person. Her voice breaks as she names what he did, details we don't need repeated to feel the weight, and then she drives the blade in. It's messy, emotional, nothing like Dexter's clean, practiced strikes. Dexter's role during and after is crucial. He doesn't cheer. He doesn't aestheticize the violence. He catches her when her knees give out. He steadies her, shaking hands, finishes what she can't, manages the cleanup with that eerie efficiency we've seen for 5 seasons. The focus is not just on the body disappearing. It's on how carefully he protects her from the logistical consequences, while refusing to edit the moral reality of what she chose. Along the way, something fundamental shifts. Lumen has now seen Dexter at his most dangerous and his most deferential. He handed her control over the one part of his life he guards most, the kill itself. How many people get that from him? How many people even know it exists? The cost is immediate. Lumen is relieved and haunted in the same breath. She can finally breathe, and she can't look away from her own hands. And the only person who understands that paradox is the man standing beside her, tightening the bond between them while quietly cutting her off from any world where this story can ever be told out loud. What happens when that shared secret becomes the only stable ground she trusts? What happens when the high fades and the body count stays? When the plan is over, but the consequences just begin? With Lumen, we watch that answer unfold in the quietest, most devastating way, the morning after her first kill. Dawn leaks in through cheap curtains. The plastic is gone, but the room still feels like a crime scene. Lumen is either pacing in tight, frantic loops or folded into herself on the edge of a bed, hands pressed together as if she can still feel the tape, the blood. The weight of the knife, the adrenaline that carried her through Boyd, through the warehouse, through that first act of revenge, has drained out. What's left is nausea. Shaking, her breathing hitching as the man she killed keeps flickering into the same mental frame as the men who raped her. One face overlays another until she can't tell if she's escaped the torture or reproduced it. This is textbook trauma physiology, but the psychology is more brutal. She's not just thinking, I killed someone. She's thinking, what if this means they broke me permanently? That's the central question eating her alive in this scene. Has she crossed some invisible line where she now belongs with them rather than with the world that never saved her. And here's where Dexter's supposed control should kick in. If we follow his usual trajectory, we expect efficiency, reassurances, a clean narrative. He'll tell her it was necessary, that they followed the code, that she did what had to be done. Maybe even a touch of pride in how well his impromptu apprentice performed. Instead, we get something far more disarming. He goes quiet. He watches her carefully, not as a project, but as someone whose expression he recognizes from the inside. To keep this clear, look at what he doesn't do. He doesn't tell her to be strong. He doesn't insist she had no choice or try to spin the kill as empowerment. No, you took back control. No victory speech. He validates the horror by not arguing with it. He offers water, a shower, clean clothes that don't smell like plastic and metal, a place to sit that isn't a table with restraints, practical care instead of philosophical spin. Along the way, we get one of Dexter's rare, crucial self-disclosures. Not a full confession, not a melodramatic breakdown, but a simple admission. Killing doesn't fix everything. The darkness doesn't vanish just because the target is gone. It's the closest he comes to telling her, I know this place you're in, without weaponizing that knowledge as a bonding tactic. That restraint is exactly why her trust deepens. He's not using her collapse as leverage. He's not angling for sex or loyalty or another partner in crime. He's just staying, bearing witness, refusing to flinch from the ugliest version of her. Eventually, the shaking slows. Maybe she falls asleep sitting up, or finally lies down, eyes swollen, Dexter still in the room like a quiet guardrail. And for the first time since her abduction, the presence of a man doesn't signal danger or investigation. It stabilizes her. Which raises a disturbing question for us. What does it mean when the safest place she can find is next to a serial killer? In this video, we're going to track how that answer pulls her deeper into Dexter's world. That feeling of safety doesn't last long, because the next thing that happens is sirens. Red and blue leaking through the blinds, radios crackling. The sound of Miami Metro doing what, on paper, they're supposed to do. Run an investigation, restore order, keep people like Dexter off the street. And almost instantly, Lumen realizes those lights are not coming to save her. They're drifting dangerously close to the man who just became her lifeline. To keep this clear, we're in the fallout of Boyd Fowler. His disappearance has a paper trail, a city truck, a work schedule, a missing person report that hits the system like a flare. When that report intersects with a body dump site Dexter thought was clean, the two worlds collide. The official case file and the secret kill room end up on the same map. Lumen hears it before she understands it. Deborah's voice outside, the thud of boots on the dock, names, dates, locations being tossed around that point, uncomfortably near the barrels of dead women, and the man who freed her from one of them. Her trauma response is immediate and logical. Hide, run, confess. Anything to get away from another group of people with badges and power over her body. Dexter does the opposite. He walks toward the sirens. In public, he slips into the role we've watched since season 1. Helpful blood spatter analyst, neutral tone, eyes on the patterns. He points to drag marks, estimates time of death. Offers just enough insight to look competent while carefully omitting the one piece of information that would collapse his entire plan, that he already knows exactly who did this and where the next victim might be. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that split screen. Because while he's standing under the crime scene tape, calmly narrating blood patterns from Masuka and Deb, he's also running a second timeline in his head. Moving Lumen, moving evidence, moving himself. We see him reroute everything with unnerving precision. He adjusts when he can visit the camp. He shifts where he stores his tools. He quietly alters Boyd's narrative so the investigation drifts toward a lone predator who vanished, not a vigilante pair escalating the body count. And Lumen watches pieces of that double game in real time. Sometimes it's through a doorway, hearing Dexter discover something he planted hours earlier. Sometimes it's from a car, seeing him reinterpret a forensic clue so it points away from the barrels he already emptied. The focus is not just on his deception, it's on her dawning realization that this is practiced. Daily, this is how he survives. What once read as terrifying duplicity now starts to look like a shield. If he can fool Dexter Morgan, Maria LaGuerta, an entire task force built around catching monsters, then maybe he can keep one more traumatized woman off their radar. Her psychology bends around that calculation. She's no longer just trusting a killer, she's trusting a system hacker. And that comes with moral vertigo. Every time Dexter nudges the case away from them, Lumen isn't just consenting to murder, she's consenting to obstructing the only formal justice she's ever been offered. Yet the consequences feel abstract compared to the concrete memory of plastic, chains, and Jordan Chase's voice. The official world had its chance. It failed. Their private code is delivering results, which leaves us in a darker place. The closer Deb and the others get, the more Lumen has to bet on Dexter's ability to stay ahead. One wrong inference, one misread blood drop, and the entire trajectory of her fragile recovery flips. Because if the man she's using as a shield ever miscalculates, he doesn't just go down alone. He takes her with him. And this is where the illusion of control finally collides with something Dexter can't quantify. Another person's life who actually matters to him. To keep this clear, we need to define what the code means in this specific season. Harry's rules are simple on paper and brutal in practice. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room, leave no evidence. Dexter needs airtight proof of repeated murder, a ritualized process of investigation, and, crucially, no personal attachment. The plan is designed to keep feeling out of it. No revenge, no improvisation, no Lumen. But once Lumen starts hunting the men who tortured her, clean lines blur. The clearest fracture point comes when they move on Jordan Chase's inner circle and focus on Cole Harmon. Dexter has evidence on Cole. Lumen has memories. What he doesn't have is a safe window. The hotel, the conference, the security cameras, every variable screams, wait. Waiting, though, means leaving Lumen exposed to a predator who already targeted her once. We watch Dexter's psychology crack in real time. On the surface, he's doing what he always does, casing the venue, studying access points, rehearsing the kill. Underneath, the voiceover betrays him. He admits the evidence is still thin, the timing sloppy, the risk to his cover enormous. He knows he's bending the code. He knows Harry would call this a failure of discipline. But when Cole corners Lumen in that hotel room, the abstract rule collides with a concrete scream. In this video, we're going to keep tracking that gap between intention and outcome. And this moment is a textbook miscalculation that he chooses on purpose. Dexter charges in without the perfect setup, without the full ritual, without the kind of documentation he once insisted on. He kills to save Lumen, not because the investigation is complete. The code doesn't make the decision here. Lumen's heartbeat does. From Lumen's vantage point, the meaning is different, but no less seismic. She sees the hesitation, the flicker where Dexter weighs the door, the hallway, the cameras. Then he steps toward her, not away. She doesn't know how sacred that code is yet, but she can feel the cost in his body language, the way his hands shake slightly after, the way his eyes scan for consequences instead of trophies. For someone who has always been treated as disposable evidence, that choice lands like a reversal of gravity. Psychologically, This is the first time a man with power over her has prioritized her safety over his own system of control. That's not romance. That's a reprogramming of what protection can look like. And Dexter pays for it. Breaking the code destabilizes the one story he believes about himself, that he's a necessary monster because he follows rules. Lumen can't name that collapse, but she senses the weight, which is why the gesture feels real rather than strategic. And once that line is crossed, it doesn't uncross. Every time he bends the code for Lumen after this, he isn't just helping her finish a list. He's tying his identity to her presence, setting up a trajectory where their partnership can only end in one of two ways: total fusion or total break. And once that line is crossed, it doesn't uncross. Which is why the first real near bust with Lumen isn't just another tense Dexter set piece. It's a live experiment in whether that new attachment is real or just another contingency in his plan. Picture the camp where they take one of Jordan Chase's men. Plastic, tools, Lumen's breathing too fast. Dexter thinks he has the logistics contained. Then a sound outside. A flashlight beam cutting through the cracks. Deborah and the investigation team have followed the trail of barrel girls and tire treads straight to their doorstep. The fantasy of control shrinks to the size of that thin plastic wall. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to these moments where the system buckles. Here, the failure is relational as much as operational. Lumen's psychology has been trained by abuse to expect abandonment the second things get dangerous. So when she hears Deb's voice, her body goes straight to flight. She's convinced this is where Dexter disappears, where the man who knows the code and the crime scene protocols simply melts into the shadows and lets her take the fall. And Dexter could. That's the crucial beat. There is a clean exit for him. Step away from the table, leave Lumen tied, let the police rescue a traumatized woman, and pin the whole scene on her captor. His career survives. His Bay Harbor myth stays buried. The central question in that split second is simple. Does he choose self-preservation, or does he choose her? He moves toward her, not away. He lowers his voice, steadies her hands, starts rearranging the room in seconds. A tarp becomes a makeshift curtain. Tools are swept, hidden, recontextualized. He stages a domestic hostage scene instead of a kill room, crafting a story where he's the obvious suspect if anyone breaks through. To keep this clear, he is not diffusing suspicion. He is redirecting it onto himself. Outside, Deborah hesitates. Inside, Dexter is the anchor. He feeds Lumen lines, tells her when to breathe, when to look afraid but not feral. The improvisation is surgical. One wrong glance, one tremor, and the whole fade collapses. But the focus is not just on whether the lie lands with the cops. It's on Lumen clocking, in real time, that Dexter is tying his fate to hers, when he absolutely does not have to. Along the way, we've seen abusers in her life promise they'd take the blame, protect her, never tell. Those promises dissolved the second consequences appeared. Dexter's choice lands differently because it happens under pressure, in the exact moment where the easier path is to cut the rope. So if he's willing to go down with her, what does that say about how he sees her? And what happens when Lumen has to decide whether she can live with being the reason Dexter's life, and everyone orbiting him, might finally implode? That question gets answered the moment the spotlight swings off Lumen and lands squarely on Dexter. Up to now, she's the one under investigation, under threat, under glass. Then the world knocks on the door and asks, very calmly, "So, where's Dexter?" The threat vector shows up in something deceptively ordinary. A neighbor, Rita's parents, even Deb calling from the station. Someone notices Dexter's pattern break. He's not at work. He's not with Harrison. He's acting strange. In this video, we're going to track that pivot, where curiosity about Lumen quietly mutates into curiosity about him, and she realizes that any wrong word could trigger an entirely different kind of collapse. To keep this clear, imagine that kitchen scene when Deb calls, frustrated about the Jordan Chase investigation, asking where Dexter has been all night. Lumen is right there. She knows exactly where he was, stalking one of her abusers, cleaning up a kill room, crossing lines that could bury them both. She has options. She could hand Deb the truth and walk away. She could distance herself, say she barely knows him. She could use Dexter's own code against him and treat this as an exit hatch. Instead, she hesitates and covers. She says he's in the shower, or out getting something for the baby, or just tired. The exact alibi matters less than the psychology behind it. She doesn't just stay silent, she fabricates a version of Dexter that fits the world's expectations. Dependable, domestic, boring, it's the first time her lie isn't about shielding herself from her abusers, but about shielding him from the consequences of his double life. That's the trust equation flipping. This is no longer transactional survival. Lumen is now complicit in Dexter's larger deception, the one that predates her and will outlive her. The focus is not just on whether she believes he'll finish her list, it's on whether she believes he deserves to keep walking around as Dexter Morgan, father, blood spatter guy, not Bay Harbor Butcher 2.0. Why else risk answering Deb wrong? When Dexter realizes what she did, there's that flicker across his face. Surprise first, then gratitude, and underneath, the thing he never says out loud, fear. Every person who's protected his secret in this series ends up dead, broken, or both. Harry, Dokes, Leela, Miguel, he knows the trajectory. He knows what it means when someone cares enough to lie for him. For Lumen, that lie is a reclamation and a repetition at the same time. She was once forced into silence to protect the men who tortured her. Now she chooses silence for a man she believes is on her side. Same behavior, different author. This is her agency reasserting itself, but it's also the exact mechanism by which Dexter's world traps people. Each major section will keep showing this pattern: protection, then entanglement, then fallout. Because every protective lie Lumen tells doesn't just prove her trust, it welds another invisible chain between them, making it that much harder to walk away clean when the killing finally stops and the investigations begin. Protection, then entanglement, then fallout. That pattern doesn't just apply to Lumen's lies, it bleeds straight into Dexter's living room. Because the next test of trust doesn't happen in a warehouse or a kill room. It happens in a nursery. We're used to Dexter's nights, meaning plastic, knives, and meticulous control. Here, the ritual is a bedtime routine, a dim lamp, a bottle half finished on the coffee table, a child's toy abandoned on the couch while Dexter moves through the space with quiet, almost invisible competence. He wipes a face, he changes a diaper one-handed, he tucks in a small body and smooths the blanket like it's another layer of protection he can engineer. Lumen watches from the doorway, or from the far end of the couch, body angled away, eyes locked in. The voyeuristic angle matters. She's not supposed to be here. She's seeing the version of Dexter no investigation report, no Bay Harbor Butcher headline could ever capture. The same hands that wrapped her in plastic now button pajamas. The same man who stalked Boyd Fowler now hums off key to calm a restless kid. To keep this clear, the psychology of this moment is brutal for her. Every man who hurt Lumen had a public face and a private one. Charming at work, monstrous in the shadows. The central question burned into her nervous system is simple: when does the mask come off? But here, in a private, unobserved moment, there is no audience to impress, no plan to execute, no code to recite. Dexter is still gentle. Still patient, still present. We see it crystallize in one small interaction. The child wakes from a nightmare, crying about a monster. Dexter doesn't rush or deflect. He sits on the edge of the bed, listens to every broken sentence, and admits his own fear of bad dreams as a kid. He offers the light on, the door cracked, his own sleep sacrificed, so this tiny person feels safe. That's not performance. That's empathy that refuses to fit her serial killer schema. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to these fractures between image and reality, because this is where Lumen's trust quietly locks in. If he can love and protect a child with this intensity, then his promise to protect her stops feeling like a tactical line. It reads as an extension of a warped but real moral code: my people are safe, everyone else is fair game. But that realization carries a different horror. Along the way, Lumen has been calculating consequences in terms of her body, her freedom, her exposure. Now the stakes widen. If Dexter's world collapses, an innocent orbiting his darkness gets pulled into the wreckage. Every kill, every near miss, every potential failure in Season 5 now has a face attached. We end on a quiet, loaded image. Morning light. The child hands Lumen a toy or leans against her side, trusting her without history. Dexter watches from the kitchen, coffee in hand, reading this as fragile domestic normalcy. For a heartbeat, she lets herself imagine a trajectory where this isn't temporary, where the violence is behind them. Then the thought of blood, plastic, and police tape snaps back in, and we feel the gap between the life they're playing at and the life they're actually building. That gap between performance and reality doesn't stay theoretical for long. It compresses into a single room, a single question, and a confession Dexter never planned to give. Not to anyone, and especially not to the woman who first saw him as a monster under fluorescent lights and plastic wrap. The trigger is pressure from every side. Jordan Chase closing in, Deborah's investigation tightening, and Lumen refusing to be handled like a fragile witness. After a close call at the camp, when Lumen nearly gets herself killed chasing one of the men alone, she finally snaps. In that dim, half-abandoned house they're using as a staging ground, she turns on Dexter and asks the central question. What is he, really? And how far will he go? Dexter's first instinct is control. Minimize, reframe. He gives her the usual half answers about needing to stop bad people, about making sure they can't hurt anyone again. He leans on Harry's language without naming Harry, a vague code with no origin story. But Lumen has been gaslit by professionals. She hears the gaps. She keeps pressing. Who taught you this? How long have you been doing it? Why do you look calm when you talk about killing? We watch his plan for emotional distance fail in real time. Short answers become longer. Deflections stall out. The pressure of the investigation outside and Lumen's stare inside cracks his composure. Then he crosses a line he usually guards more fiercely than any kill room door. He talks about the urge itself. He tells her about being found in blood as a child, about Harry realizing what he was becoming, about the code as a set of rules built not to make him good, but to keep him from being worse. He doesn't glamorize it. He doesn't sanitize it. He admits that killing brings relief, that the dark passenger isn't a metaphor to him, but a felt, physical pull. To keep this clear, he spells out the constraints, evidence, proof, ritual, only those who have already crossed a moral line. Lumen doesn't flinch. She listens like someone taking testimony, cataloging data points. Is this a predator explaining his method, or a system she can actually predict? Along the way, we see her reframe him not as chaos, but as a set of rules with a name and a history. The focus is not just on what he shares, but on what that sharing gives her. For the first time since the barrels, A man is not hiding his motives from her. Her abusers smiled, lied, and shifted the ground under her feet. Dexter, in contrast, hands her the blueprint to his darkness and waits for a verdict. And she stays. She asks follow-up questions. She starts planning with him, testing the edges of the code in their next move against Jordan. She never says, "I trust you," but from this point in the season, their trajectory changes. She's no longer just surviving beside a killer. She's betting on the fact that his behavior will follow the rules he just confessed. Which raises a harder problem we'll have to confront next. What happens when someone finally trusts Dexter's code more than Dexter does? When we follow that question into their next move, we land in the most dangerous kind of plan. The one that demands Lumen walk straight back into hell and pretend she's fine. To catch the last man. To confirm that Jordan Chase is really the spider at the center of this web, she has to do the one thing her entire psychology is screaming against. Meet him, bait him, enter his territory on purpose. This isn't abstract risk. The hotel room, the camp, his private spaces are built to mirror the original conditions of her victimization, isolation, control, no witnesses, no exits. The investigation may be about evidence and confirmation, but for Lumen, every step is a live reenactment. Her body remembers the table before her mind can form the words. Her breathing shortens. Her hands shake. And she still says yes. To keep this clear, she doesn't say yes because she trusts the world. She says yes on one condition. Dexter cannot fail her. Not once. Not in the small ways that people usually fail trauma survivors, by doubting them, minimizing, looking away. If she is going to walk into the lion's den, then his promise to protect her has to be more than a feeling. It has to be a system. So Dexter does what he always does when he feels something he can't name. He builds a plan. Surveillance on Jordan's movements. Backup vehicles, weapons stashed in vents and under seats. Escape routes mapped, memorized, rehearsed. Code words for when she's watched, when she's touched, when she's seconds from being overpowered. The focus is not just on killing Jordan, it's on containing the variables that could shatter Lumen's already fragile sense of safety. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this pattern, Dexter mistaking emotional responsibility for logistical control. But here, for once, the over-engineering mostly works in Lumen's favor. As she walks into the hotel, into the camp, into those echoing, fluorescent spaces, her senses are overloaded with triggers. The carpet, the smell, the way Jordan's voice drops when they're alone. The only thing that keeps her moving is the knowledge that Dexter is watching, listening, ready. And then the plan wobbles. Jordan changes the meeting place. A bodyguard lingers too long. A door closes where it should have stayed open. For one stretched, airless heartbeat, communication falters and Lumen is alone again in the dark with a predator. We feel the collapse of every safeguard at once. Is this the moment Dexter's illusion of control finally snaps? It isn't. Not yet. Instead of freezing or cutting losses, Dexter adapts. He abandons his perfect vantage point, blows his own cover, repositions to reestablish contact. He breaks his code's usual priority of secrecy in favor of her life. In real time, he proves that "I'll protect you" is not just aspirational, it's operational. When Lumen walks out alive, having faced the lion's den with Dexter as her unseen armor, her belief in him hardens. It shifts from hopeful to almost absolute, and that's its own kind of danger. Because what happens to a man whose plans always fail when, for once, someone believes they won't? Her belief hardens. And almost immediately, the story forces her to ask the one question Dexter never really asks himself. What happens after? The catalyst is deceptively small. A quiet moment between operations, when the adrenaline drops and the list of men who hurt her is suddenly short enough to count on one hand. Lumen does what any survivor with a survival instinct does. She looks past the next kill. She asks about leaving Miami, about disappearing, about what their lives look like when Jordan Chase is gone and the investigation cools down. In this video, we're going to sit in that gap between her question and his non-answer, because that silence is its own kind of confession. To keep this clear, Lumen walks into that conversation with assumptions already in place. She's seen the kill rooms, the plastic, the meticulous planning. She's watched Dexter manage evidence, dodge police, and improvise when a plan faces collapse. In her mind, a man this controlled has to have a go bag somewhere. Fake IDs, cash, a route out of the country. Of course, the Bay Harbor butcher has an exit strategy. How else has he survived this long? That's Lumen's psychology talking. If she were him, there would be a master plan. Finish the list, burn everything, vanish. Her entire trajectory is about clawing her way toward an after. Some distant version of herself who isn't defined by a barrel in the back of a truck. But when she pushes Dexter on it, what then? Where do you go? How do you stop this from swallowing you? What she finds is a void. No concrete escape. No timeline. No endpoint. Just vague gestures about keeping the code, staying careful. Going back to work as if this season of shared violence is a detour rather than a revelation. His words circle logistics. Her safety. The next kill. They never land on his own exit. And that's the tell. Dexter isn't planning to get out. He's planning to maintain. To keep killing under the radar until the investigation finally catches up or his luck runs out. The central question of his life, how does this end, is one he refuses to outline, because any real answer exposes the failure at the heart of his control. For Lumen, that realization cuts both ways. On one level, it makes him more trustworthy. He's not grooming her as an accomplice he can later abandon in some carefully scripted escape. There is no con. There is only this night, this victim, this ritual. On another level, it's terrifying. If he has no off-ramp, then their partnership doesn't either. The focus is not just on fear of prison or exposure. It's existential. Lumen is fighting for a finite goal: justice, closure, the ability to sleep. Dexter is living inside an endless present tense of sanctioned killing. By staying with him, she steps into a story that has no natural final chapter. Each major section of her arc from this point forward is shaped by that unspoken calculation. If Dexter won't design an ending, she will eventually have to. And when her need for an after finally slams into his need to keep the dark passenger fed, what exactly will she be willing to do to force an exit he refuses to plan? So when we move toward the end of that list, the psychology of the whole partnership tilts. There's not a crowd of names anymore. There's one. The architect. Jordan Chase. Every previous body on plastic has been pointing to this man, and the investigation, the stalking, the failed hotel grab, all compress into a single promise. If they can take him, the loop might finally close. Up to now, Lumen's fuel has been immediate. Don't die. Don't be powerless. Don't let the next man walk away laughing. Each kill is a reaction, a way to regain control in the exact space where it was stolen. But with only Chase left, her motivation shifts. The central question isn't, how do I survive tonight? Anymore, it's who am I when there's no one left to hunt? This isn't just another night's work. It's an attempt to draw a line she never has to cross again. Dexter feels that shift before she can articulate it. Watch how his planning changes. The rituals are still there. The surveillance, the samples, the contingency routes, stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room. But threaded through that precision is a new softness. He keeps talking about after, not thereafter, her after. A life where this investigation is over, where the code recedes, where she doesn't wake up thinking about plastic sheeting. To keep this clear, we can zoom in on one crucial conversation in those final preparations. They're mapping Chase's schedule, reviewing the camp, rehearsing the approach. Then, Lumen breaks the script. She asks what happens when it's done. Does he expect her to stay? Does he even believe someone like her can heal? Or is she just another permanent dark passenger in human form? It's a test, and a brutal one. Dexter's answer is quiet, almost anti-Dexter in its lack of control fantasy. He doesn't pitch a shared mission, doesn't frame their trajectory as some ongoing crusade. He tells her that if, when Chase is gone, the darkness leaves her, she should go with it. He's prepared to lose her. He will not drag her back into this world to keep himself from being alone. That's the evolution of trust right there. Early on, she needed to know he wouldn't hurt her, wouldn't abandon her mid-plan, wouldn't betray her to the police. Now she's probing something more fragile. Can she trust him not to cling? Not to manufacture new enemies just to keep her orbiting his nightlife? And here's the tragic irony. The more she believes he will let her go, the safer it feels to lean in. She lets herself bond more deeply in those last strategy sessions, lets the intimacy of shared violence blur into something almost domestic. Along the way, every joke, every glance over a blueprint quietly raises the cost of the goodbye they're both pretending not to schedule. By the time everything is lined up for that final kill, Lumen can, for the first time, imagine a life without Dexter at all. That possibility hangs over the plan like another blade, a lifeline, and a heartbreak, waiting on the other side of Jordan Chase's last breath. By the time we reach that final stretch, the strange thing is how normal it all feels. Plastic, gloves, code words, post-kill debriefs in Dexter's kitchen. This is their new equilibrium. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room. Lumen doesn't flinch at the knives anymore, and Dexter doesn't need to ask what she can handle. He reads her breathing, her silences, the way her hand pauses over a photo. They operate like a single plan split across two bodies. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on their efficiency, but on the psychology underneath it. Lumen's triggers have become part of Dexter's risk assessment. He knows when she's about to spiral and redirects her into logistics. She knows when his control is slipping and pulls him back into the investigation. On paper, this is the safest version of Dexter we've seen all season. No improvising alone, no rogue detours, a partner who actually sees him. And yet, as the last operation looms, something quieter creeps in. Lumen starts to notice how easily she fits into his life now, how natural it feels to wash blood off plastic, then talk about takeout, how the only place she doesn't feel hunted is in a room designed for killing. That realization scares her more than Jordan Chase, because if this is what safety looks like, what does healing even mean? Dexter, on the other hand, is brushing up against something dangerously close to contentment. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this pattern. Every time Dexter thinks he's found control, the trajectory of his life bends toward collapse. Here, control looks like a woman who knows his secret, shares his work, and doesn't recoil. For once, the dark passenger isn't a burden to hide. It's the foundation of a relationship. Part of him doesn't want this season of his life to end, even as he tells himself it has to. That's where the misalignment leaks through. Lumen starts talking about apartments, jobs, therapy appointments she might actually keep. Her future is framed in daylight. Dexter responds with hypotheticals about people like Jordan who will always be out there. It's theoretical until it isn't. The central question shifts in that gap. Is he imagining future hunts in general, or future hunts with her? Up to now, Lumen's trust tests have been concrete. Will he kill me? Will he abandon me on a table the way they did? He's past those. The new test is more insidious. When her need to stop collides with his need to continue, whose need wins? Can a man whose entire life is structured around repetition accept a mission that actually ends? Along the way, the qualities that made Dexter safe in the hunt, his persistence, his focus, his comfort with darkness, start to look double-edged. The same relentlessness that kept her alive could keep her tethered to a life she's trying to escape. As they step into the final phase of their plan, Lumen believes she can trust Dexter with her life. What she doesn't yet know, and what the finale will force both of them to answer, is whether she can trust him with her freedom once the killing is done. And this is where the ground quietly shifts. Lumen thinks she's partnered with a system. What she actually finds, as they move deeper into the plan, is a scared person hiding behind a system that keeps glitching under pressure. From her vantage point, the code doesn't look like some sleek moral algorithm. It looks like a survival script written by a traumatized teenager who walked in on a bloodbath and decided the only way to live was to turn chaos into procedure. Plastic, slides, rules about only killers and never get caught. To us, they've always been Dexter's brand. To Lumen, seeing them up close, they read more like superstition. Rituals you cling to when you're terrified of what happens without them. The central question for her stops being, can I trust what he does? And becomes, who decided this is the way he has to live? She asks him, directly, who made these rules? Why he follows them? What happens if he doesn't? And Dexter, usually so confident about Harry's design, suddenly looks less like an authority and more like a lifelong patient reciting a treatment plan he's too afraid to question. Let's kick things off with the first concrete crack she sees. Boyd's table is Lumen's origin point with the code. She's awake. She sees the knives, the plastic, the rehearsed calm. By the code, she's a witness. A liability. She should die. Instead, Dexter lets her go, then keeps circling back, pulled toward her pain against his own rules. That deviation isn't just mercy, it's evidence that the code can be overridden by something he doesn't have language for yet. As the investigation into Jordan Chase escalates, those overrides multiply. Dexter lies to protect her, tampers with evidence, and walks into the hotel and the camp without anything resembling his usual control. By his standards, this is operational failure. By hers, it's proof. Every time he chooses her safety over clean execution, every time he risks exposure so she doesn't have to face another captor alone, Lumen sees the hierarchy of his loyalties rearrange. She is now above the ritual. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on Dexter breaking rules, but on how he looks when he breaks them. He's shaken when a body isn't where it should be. He's rattled when Deborah gets close. He panics when Lumen is taken. This is not the flat affect of an unfeeling predator. This is someone who believes that if the code collapses, he becomes the very thing that hurt her. And that's the paradox. The more unstable his moral system appears, the safer he becomes in Lumen's psychology. If he's afraid of himself, he's not indifferent. If he doubts the code, he can choose. If he can choose, he can choose her. Along the way, that realization shifts her trust from this method will protect me to this man is trying not to become my worst nightmare. The question that lingers as they close in on Jordan is brutal. What happens to that fragile balance once her need for vengeance is gone and his need for the code remains. That brutal question doesn't stay hypothetical for long. The show gives Lumen a night where the mission is technically over. The adrenaline is draining out of her system, and she's trapped with the one variable she still can't calculate, Dexter himself. This is the night the monster doesn't show up. They've done the work. Bodies handled, plastic torn down, Jordan Chase silenced. On paper, the plan succeeded. But Lumen's trauma psychology doesn't care about operational victory. It's running a different investigation entirely. When the task is done and the leverage is gone, does the man with the knives finally reveal what he really wanted from her? Because that's her lingering core fear. Every other man who held power over her body used it. The captors in the barrels case, the guards who pretended to be protectors, the way help became a prelude to horror. So when she's alone with Dexter in that dim, too quiet space, the central question playing in her head is simple and lethal. Now that he doesn't need me, what stops him from becoming them? To keep this clear, we can track the night through her hypervigilance. A glass set down too firmly, a pause before he speaks, the way he moves across the room. Each tiny detail is a possible trigger, a potential sign that the mask is slipping. Along the way, the camera keeps cutting between her face in the present and the echo of what we know she's seen before. Men closing in, footsteps behind her, hands on her without warning. And this is where Dexter's failure to perform the role she expects becomes the turning point. He doesn't crowd her on the couch. He gives her physical space, hovering at the edge of the room instead of looming over her. When he reaches out, he asks. A hand on her shoulder, a hug, even just sitting close enough to touch, each moment comes with explicit consent. He offers her an exit instead of demanding loyalty. She can leave Miami, she can walk away from him, she owes him nothing. The snap never comes. No sudden rage when she questions him, no coercion when she hesitates, no sexual threat when she's exhausted and vulnerable and easy to corner. From a torture survivor's perspective, that absence is not neutral, it's data. It contradicts every pattern her nervous system has mapped onto male power and control. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to these gaps between expectation and outcome. Here, the focus is not just on what Dexter does, but on what he refuses to do when he has every opportunity to exploit her. By morning, Lumen's internal loop has new evidence. She waited for the monster and got a man folding sheets of plastic, quietly making breakfast, already thinking about how to protect her if she leaves. That's the night her trust shifts from a tactical alliance inside a kill plan to something terrifyingly simple, belief that Dexter will not hurt her when there's nothing left to gain. And once she believes that, the real tragedy is that her dark passenger doesn't stick around to protect him in return. That belief gets its trial by fire in the one place Dexter has always treated as untouchable, the kill room. Plastic, knives, a bound body on the table. Only this time, the body is Lumen, and the predator isn't Dexter, it's Jordan Chase. We're in the lair of the self-help messiah, surrounded by soundproof walls and motivational slogans that double as threats. Lumen is gagged, strapped down, right back where her original torture began. And Dexter, for once, isn't the architect of the room. He's the intruder. He breaks in not as a lone hunter operating under Harry's code, but as a partner crashing someone else's plan. Determined to finish what they both started before the whole thing collapses. To keep this clear, we have to stay in Lumen's psychology. She hears footsteps. Plastic rustles. For a second, this could be another captor, another escalation. Instead, it's Dexter's face leaning over her, cutting her free. No monologue about his dark passenger, no demand for gratitude. Just fast, precise movements, the same ritual efficiency we've seen all season, now repurposed for rescue instead of control. Then comes the real break in the pattern. Dexter doesn't sedate Jordan and claim the table for himself. He doesn't center his own need or his own ritual. He puts the knife in Lumen's hand. And he steps back. That tiny choreography shift is everything. In this video, we're going to keep returning to these micro moments where control changes hands, because this is the most dangerous version yet. Dexter is literally arming a trauma survivor in a room where he is the only other living witness. He trusts her not to turn the blade on him, not to expose him, not to flinch at the last second and turn this into another failure. She trusts that if anything goes wrong, he will hold the space, hold the perimeter, hold her together. Jordan taunts, bargains, tries to fracture that fragile alliance. But the central question for Lumen isn't whether Jordan deserves to die. It's whether she believes Dexter will still be there once she's done. When she drives the knife into Jordan's chest, it isn't just revenge. It's a vow written in blood. I accept the world you've shown me, and I trust you to stand beside me in it. Afterward, there's no seduction on the plastic, no power play, just two people shaking, bloody, breathing in sync on a floor that used to belong only to Dexter's fantasy of control. The focus is not just on the body between them, but on the fact that neither one is hiding from the other anymore. Along the way to this moment, every shared kill has tested their alliance. Here, it's sealed. And that raises the next uncomfortable question. Once the table is clean and the list is finished, what's left of a trust that was forged entirely in the presence of a shared enemy? Once the last body is gone, the real question surfaces. Why does Lumen feel safer standing next to a confessed serial killer than walking through a hotel lobby in daylight? That's the paradox at the heart of their trajectory, and it tells us as much about the world that broke her as it does about Dexter's darkness. Let's kick things off by looking at who failed her. Before Dexter, Lumen's life was structured around institutions that promised protection, the police who never found her, the community that never noticed a shipping container full of screams, the bystanders who heard something, saw something, and decided it was someone else's problem. Every layer that should have intervened either looked away or arrived too late. The investigation into Jordan Chase exists, but it's abstract, procedural, slow. No one shows up for Lumen as a person. Dexter does. Not because he's good, but because once he locks onto a plan, he follows through with unnerving precision. He tracks Boyd, finds Lumen on the table, and when his whole system of control collapses in that moment, she wakes up under the plastic. He doesn't retreat to self-preservation. He adapts around her. He hides her. He teaches her. Every operational failure in Season 5, the botched hotel confrontation, the camp raid spiraling into chaos, becomes another proof that when things go wrong, he moves toward her, not away. And crucially, he does it without a mask. The central question for Lumen is not, is he dangerous? She already knows he is. It's, is he lying about the kind of danger he is? The men who tortured her smiled first. They were ordinary, charming, socially fluent. Their cruelty lived behind small talk and self-help slogans. Dexter, by contrast, sits her down and names his urges. His code. His past on that same ocean of blood she's drowning in. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this inversion. The killer is the only one who refuses to pretend he's safe. To keep this clear, Dexter's rules become her map. Never hurt the innocent. Always finish what you start. Protect the secret. It's twisted, but it's predictable. She knows exactly what happens if a name goes on the list, what happens if evidence appears, what happens if Deborah gets too close. In a life where danger used to be random, a roadside abduction, a vacation gone wrong, this is almost comforting. There's a system. There's a code. There are consequences she can anticipate instead of shocks that come out of nowhere. Psychologically, that shift is huge. In a world where chaos shattered her, a controlled, named danger that actively chooses to protect her reads as safety. He is a blade pointed outward, and for once, she's standing behind it. Along the way, every shared kill reinforces the same message. With Dexter, the horror is visible and negotiated. With everyone else, it was invisible until it was too late. But that raises a darker implication we'll have to confront next. If safety now means aligning yourself with a monster, what happens when that monster's control inevitably fails again? So when we ask what happens when Dexter's control fails again, Season 5 gives us a chilling answer. It doesn't fail. The mission works. Jordan is dead. The Barrels are avenged. And in that success, the entire logic of Lumen's trust quietly expires. In the abandoned camp, with Jordan bleeding out on the plastic, we watch the pressure cooker finally release. No more recordings, no more hunts, no more waking up already planning the next investigation into her own trauma. For the first time since the Barrels, Lumen can imagine a day that isn't organized around fear. That image is tiny at first. A morning without flinching. A mirror without shame. A life where she is not a case file, or a target, or a weapon. And that's exactly when Dexter makes his offer. Stay, don't walk away from this purpose we've built. In this video, we're going to treat that offer not as a romantic gesture, but as a plan, an ongoing, privatized code of justice. Two dark passengers synced forever. On the surface, it's sincere. He believes he's giving her meaning, partnership, even a way to keep that reclaimed power from slipping away. But listen to what he's really promising. Eternal purpose means eternal darkness. Every future together is a future of ritual, secrecy, and bodies wrapped in plastic. No kids' birthday parties without checking alibis. No vacations without scouting dump sites. To keep this clear, Dexter is offering her his life as it actually is, a life where control is an illusion and every season ends in collapse. Lumen sees that. She understands that her trust in Dexter was born in a very specific world, a world where she was still in the Barrels, psychologically. And he was the only person willing to climb down there with her. She trusted him to help her survive. She trusted him to help her reclaim her voice, her body, her story. That is not the same thing as trusting him to be the foundation of a normal life. How do you build a kitchen table on top of a kill room? The central question for Lumen isn't, do I trust Dexter anymore? It's which world do I choose? The trauma world, where trust means sharpening knives with him in the dark, or the daylight world, where healing means walking away from the one person who finally made her feel safe? Along the way, she realizes that staying would freeze her in that crisis identity forever. So she leaves, not because the trust failed, but because it worked too well. The painful truth is that the only way to honor what Dexter gave her is to refuse the future he's offering. And that decision becomes its own kind of verdict on Dexter's entire trajectory. If the healthiest person who ever saw his full truth has to abandon him to stay healthy, what does that say about everyone who doesn't? We'll see how that verdict echoes through the next relationships he tries to build. If Lumen is the healthiest verdict Dexter ever receives, we have to ask, what convinced her to trust him in the first place? Not the fantasy of a flawless mastermind, but the reality of a man whose plans fail loudly, messily, and in front of her. Let's kick things off with Boyd. Dexter's plan is textbook control, stalk the target, prep the kill room, eliminate the loose end. Except the loose end wakes up on the table. Lumen sees the plastic, the knives, his face. The entire code collapses in one instant of eye contact. His first instinct isn't to silence the witness. It's to hesitate, explain, and then spend the next episode chasing down the consequences of that hesitation, rather than making her disappear. Lumen runs, screams, fights him in the swamp, and when she finally realizes he's killed Boyd, she doesn't go to the police. She goes back to the man who put her on a table. Because he didn't finish the job when every rule said he should. Then, the Barrel Girls rescue. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that gap between Dexter's intention and what actually happens when Lumen is in the room. He plans a clean extraction at the camp, but the operation is chaos. She's triggered by the barrels. He's improvising routes. The victims aren't there. And Jordan Chase is always one step ahead. Lumen's response isn't, "You failed, I'm out." It's, "Show me more." Every failure deepens her questions, but also her commitment. Who is this killer who keeps choosing her safety over his secrecy? The hotel room is the purest panic test. Dexter's plan is to isolate one of her abusers in a controlled setting. Instead, they're interrupted, the body count threatens to spill into the hallway, and Lumen is shaking, covered in the echo of what was done to her. He doesn't snap at her, doesn't blame her fear for the operational failure. He slows down, owns the mess, and folds her panic into the new plan. To keep this clear, she is not trusting his perfection. She is testing his behavior when perfection is impossible. Meanwhile, Quinn's investigation closes in. Deb is circling the barrel case, and Jordan is actively outmaneuvering them. Every external pressure exposes the weak spots in Dexter's code and logistics. Yet at each point where Dexter could cut Lumen loose to save himself, he does the opposite. He lies to Deb, misdirects the investigation, walks into Jordan's territory at the camp, and then again at the final site, always with Lumen beside him, not behind him. The focus is not just on the failures themselves, but on the pattern they reveal. Each major section will show us the same rhythm, plan, collapse, adaptation, accountability for Lumen. The evidence that Dexter's darkness is disciplined enough to trust doesn't come from the kills that go right. It comes from the nights when everything goes wrong, and he still refuses to sacrifice her. The very moments that should have shattered her faith become the proof she needs to bet her life on him, and the template for why that bet can never last for anyone else. So how did Lumen learn she could trust Dexter? Not in spite of his monstrosity, but because he is the first monster in her life who turns his darkness outward, in her defense instead of inward, on her body. The same tools she first sees hovering over her on Boyd Fowler's table become the instruments that dismantle the men who made her world unlivable. That reversal is the terrible, honest answer. To keep this clear, we can see her trust resting on 3 pillars. First, his protection when every plan collapses. From the botched Jordan Chase hotel confrontation to the chaotic camp raid, every step of their investigation into the Barrel Girls' ring exposes how fragile Dexter's control really is. He loses the upper hand. He improvises badly. But each failure becomes a case study in one thing. When the chaos hits, he steps in front of her, not behind her. He hides evidence, not her body. He sacrifices the plan, not the survivor. Second, he shares both power and vulnerability. He does not just use her as bait or a witness. He puts the knives in her hands, lets her choose targets, and lets her see his own psychology without the usual mask. He tells her about the code. He lets her into the kill rooms. He lets her see him afraid. In this video, we're going to keep returning to that pattern across the series. Dexter is at his most honest, not with the people he loves in theory, but with the people who share his violence in practice. With Lumen, that honesty is the point, not the collateral damage. Third, and most disturbingly, he refuses to exploit her when he easily could. He finds her bound on a table, conscious, a liability to his secret, and a trigger for his own trauma. The efficient choice is murder. The selfish choice is to reshape her into another Leela or Miguel, a disciple orbiting his needs. Instead, he lets her walk, then spends an entire season proving that his darkness will answer to her boundaries. For someone whose agency was methodically erased, that restraint is louder than any promise. But the central question is not just how that trust forms, it's why it cannot last. Their bond is perfectly calibrated for revenge and fatally misaligned for ordinary life. Shared violence gives them a language, a plan, a sense of control. It does not give them a future. The moment the last man on the list dies, Lumen's dark passenger disappears, and the very qualities that made Dexter safe in the hunt make him dangerous in the daylight. She no longer needs a monster on her side, so she can finally see that he is still a monster. Along the way, we've watched Dexter's partnerships fail, operationally, relationally, existentially. Lumen is the one alliance that works on its own terms, and that success is exactly why it must end. So here's the challenge. Rewatch Season 5 through Lumen's eyes. Ask yourself who actually feels safer, the woman who knows she's with a killer, or the people who believe Dexter's mask. Then subscribe, like, and drop a comment with the next relationship or season you want us to put under the knife.